She was the daughter of the Empire's most villainous duke, yet here she stood, treated like merchandise on an auction block. From the moment she was born, her family was torn apart. Not only did the Duchess tragically lose her life, but the Duke was exiled. The young girl, still a child in the palace walls, was entrusted to Count Semond, one of the Duke's subordinates. At first, Count Semond showed some care for her, but upon hearing of the Duke's death, his attitude towards the young girl took a sharp, cruel turn. He banished her to the servants' quarters, subjecting her to constant verbal abuse and physical violence. Even the other servants treated her with disdain. This was the miserable life the young girl endured, until, after a failed escape attempt, she was sold to a slave trader. Standing on the auction block, the young girl looked on in terror at the people below vying to purchase her. Suddenly, a man cloaked in black offered a staggering $5 million. Fear gripped the young girl's heart. What could this man possibly want with her after spending such an exorbitant sum? Before she could dwell on it, the slave trader brought her before the man. "I hope you enjoy your purchase," the trader said before departing. The man asked gently, "What is your name?" The young girl clutched her small, shackled hands and whispered that she didn't have one. The man's expression darkened. He crouched down and took her hands in his, effortlessly unlocking the shackles with a touch of magic. He spoke as if to himself. "First, I charged Semond with the care of my fourth child. Second, I demanded he give my fourth child a name with sincerity. Third, until I returned for my daughter, he was to protect her. These are the 3 conditions I set forth 7 years ago when I entrusted you to Count Semond. I will make those who brought you to this place pay dearly." With the sound of an explosion echoing behind him, the man strode towards the exit. 2 rows of knights stood at attention by the door. The man walked between them, issuing a chilling command. "Destroy this building immediately. Burn all the bodies." The man walked on for a while before realizing the girl hadn't followed. He stopped and looked back at the small girl, still frozen in place. "We should go home." Disbelief washed over the young girl. Could this truly be her father? The man had spent $5 million at an auction to buy back his own daughter, all because her family had been tragically torn apart after her birth. This was their first meeting in 7 years. The man brought the young girl back to the Duke's mansion and immediately instructed her on 2 matters regarding her stay. "First, you are my daughter. Your conduct must befit a lady of this house. Second, I despise trouble. Therefore, do not throw tantrums or create unnecessary drama in my presence." Faced with this unfamiliar father, the young girl was understandably apprehensive and withdrawn. Seeing his daughter's frail appearance, the Duke immediately ordered the servants to prepare food for her. He then announced his intention to travel to the capital to settle some scores. As soon as her father left, the young girl hid. The maids at Count Semond's estate had been relentlessly cruel, berating and hitting her. So, when she saw a group of maids approaching, she instinctively wanted to flee. The maids quickly found the young girl hiding behind a pillar. "Miss, if you don't come out soon, the warm apple pie will get cold. And the custard tarts, honey juice, and roasted chicken too." At the mention of food, the young girl's stomach rumbled audibly. The maids tried again, their voices gentle. "This is your home now. If you don't mind, could you please come out?" The young girl peeked out from behind the pillar. She shyly explained, "I don't mind you." Seeing the young lady speak up, the maids were overjoyed. They introduced themselves and then extended their hands towards her. "Let's go eat some delicious food now." The young girl quickly withdrew her hands. She had been scolded and beaten for having dirty hands before. She softly explained that she was dirty. Seeing the young girl's timid demeanor, the maids' hearts ached with sympathy. Fina knelt down and gently took Yilin's hand. "It's perfectly understandable that you might have a certain scent after your ordeal. If it troubles you, we can see to your ablutions immediately." Yilin, unaccustomed to being cared for, chose to bathe herself. She remained there until Fina cautiously opened the bathroom door. The sight that greeted her was astonishing. The bathroom, sparkling clean, had been tidied by Yilin after her bath. Seeing the scars that littered Yilin's small frame, the maids' hearts ached. They quickly and tenderly dressed her. After being carefully groomed, Yilin looked as delicate and lovely as a porcelain doll. Led to the dining table, Yilin ate the delicious food with a newfound lightness in her heart. Tears welled in Fina's eyes as she watched the thoughtful young girl. "Miss," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "you are our esteemed mistress now. Please allow us to handle all the troublesome tasks from now on." A smile The first Fina had seen touched Yilin's lips. "Thank you," she whispered. She was the daughter of the esteemed duke, yet fear of the servants had driven her to hide. She had even meticulously cleaned the bathroom after a bath, a habit born from the harsh treatment she endured while fostered in another household. The next day, Fina showed Yilin around the duke's mansion. When they reached the gallery, Yilin's gaze became fixed on a particular painting. It was a family portrait taken before she was born. The faces depicted were her closest relatives, yet aside from the duke, she recognized none of them. Noticing her confusion, Fina introduced her to her 3 brothers. The eldest young master is currently on an expedition to subdue the Saint Hung, Fina explained. The second young master is studying at the Royal Academy. And the youngest young master, she continued, received a rather unique blessing during his awakening ceremony, so he is currently undergoing secluded training. This is a godless world, abandoned by its deities, Fina elaborated. The Saint Hung are monsters born from the curse of the last god. Every child here undergoes an awakening ceremony at the age of 8, she said. During this ceremony, they receive a blessing. A blessing is a power bestowed by the seers, known as the guardians of the heart. Each blessing is unique. For example, Fina illustrated, Duke Gray's blessing granted him immense magical power and knowledge of all arcane arts. Most blessings are less remarkable. Mine, for instance, is simply an immunity to illness. A flicker of curiosity sparked within Yilin. What would her blessing be when she turned 8 next year? Just then, the butler announced Duke Gray's imminent return. However, the Duke seemed to be in low spirits, so Yilin returned to her room. Fina, needing to attend to some urgent matters, asked her to wait there. After a while, with Fina still absent, Yilin decided to explore on her own. But the moment she stepped out of her room, she became disoriented. She hadn't wandered far, yet the corridor was unfamiliar. She came across a door and, pushing it open, found herself in a laboratory. A flicker of movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Yilin froze, instantly alert. Suddenly, several spectral figures, dressed as servants, materialized around her. "Miss," one whispered, "you are not permitted to enter here." Terror seized Yilin, and she fled, not stopping until the laboratory door slammed shut behind her with a resounding clang. She found herself in a beautiful garden, a tranquil lake shimmering nearby. Something flickered beneath the surface of the water. Crouching by the lake's edge, Yilin peered intently. "What is that?" she murmured. Suddenly, icy hands erupted from the lake, dragging Yilin into its depths. This was a castle imbued with magic, a place where it was easy to lose one's way. And the room she had stumbled into, quite by accident, was teeming with ghosts. Even the seemingly tranquil lake waters could suddenly sprout countless hands, dragging one into its depths. Yilin was pulled towards the bottom of the lake by those icy, ghostly hands, just as she felt her breath escaping her. A splash echoed across the surface. Immediately after, a pair of strong hands pulled her back to shore from behind. Gasping for air, the young girl, having narrowly escaped death, remembered the eerie scene with the fox, the feeling of countless eyes staring at her. Suddenly, someone gently patted her back. She turned to see a dark-haired boy crouching beside her, a gentle expression on his face. His eyes shimmered with kindness. "Didn't anyone tell you not to wander here alone?" The terrified Yilin, only now realizing the full extent of her near drowning, burst into tears. This startled the boy, who, thinking he had hurt her when he pulled her out, held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I only wanted to help you. Please don't cry." He then gently touched his finger to Yilin's forehead, casting a spell. A cool sensation washed over her, and the discomfort from nearly drowning slowly faded. Seeing her calm down, the boy politely bowed. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Yilin, still shaken, stammered a greeting in return. The boy beamed, leaving Yilin puzzled. "It's just a greeting," she thought. "Why is he so happy?" The boy explained that he was a guest at the mansion. Yilin asked if he could guide her back to the mansion. The boy readily agreed. Together, they walked through the lush forest, arriving at the mansion gates in no time. Yilin was still trying to process everything. Moments ago, she was by the lake, and now, in the blink of an eye, she was at the entrance. Her clothes were dry, and her hair was fluffy and clean. as if she hadn't fallen into the water at all. The boy gestured for her to enter and told her not to mention their encounter to anyone. Yilin wanted to ask him something more, but he had vanished. The strange events didn't frighten her. Instead, she felt a pang of regret. She thought, if I had known he was so familiar with the mansion grounds, I should have asked him to take me directly to my room. Just then, she noticed another door. Where does this one lead? She wondered. What was happening? Why would Duke Gray draw his sword against his own daughter? Lost once again in the magical castle, she pushed open the door before her. The room was dimly lit and, judging by the furnishings, appeared to be a study. Yilin looked around. Where am I? She whispered. Suddenly, a voice echoed from the shadows. I know you're there. Now even stray cats and dogs dare to openly defy me. Yilin's heart pounded. It was unmistakably Duke Gray's voice. Had she inadvertently stumbled into her father's room? The Duke, radiating menace, approached, drawing his sword. Knowing her father was a cold-hearted villain who cared for no one, Yilin collapsed in terror. The Duke stopped before her, sword in hand. As he saw her face, he paused, surprised. What are you doing here? Overwhelmed with fear, Yilin couldn't speak. I don't want to die, she thought desperately. Finally, she found her voice. I'm sorry, she whispered. I walked into the wrong room. I'm sorry, she repeated, kneeling before him. Looking at his daughter's abject apology, the Duke sighed. I thought an assassin had snuck into the mansion. He sheathed his sword. A hint of anger laced his voice. What did they do to you at Count Simmons' estate to make you so groveling? Confusion clouded Yilin's face. What was her father talking about? Was he angry? He gestured for her to sit on a stool. Once she was seated, he began to question her about what she had learned at the Count's estate. Yilin answered cautiously, I can read and write simple words. The Duke was speechless. The young girl, Yilin, spoke again. I also know basic arithmetic. The Duke's face darkened. Could this be all? Watching her father's obvious anger, Yilin's heart pounded with anxiety. He wouldn't regret buying me back, would he? She thought frantically. I must do everything I can to stay here. With this resolve, she blurted out, I have a very good memory. I remember almost everyone who has visited Count Simmons' mansion, and I'm a very good errand runner. I'm also very good at cleaning and laundry. A flicker of sympathy crossed the Duke's eyes. He pointed to a book on the table. The Analects. Have you read it? Yilin's small face flushed crimson. No, but I think I've heard of it. The Duke continued his questioning. Have you studied piano? Yilin felt even more ashamed. No, I haven't. But if there are books, I can read. The Duke sighed. How would he regard this daughter who knew practically nothing? He was the accomplished Duke of the Empire, a master of many skills, and yet his daughter was a little illiterate girl. Facing her stern father, the young girl, who had been trembling with fear only a moment before, now began to drift off to sleep, just as her small body swayed, about to tumble from the chair. The Duke reached out a large hand and caught her steadily. He sighed softly. Carrying her to his own bed, he said, You can sleep here tonight. Lying in her father's bed, Yilin felt an unexpected sense of security and quickly drifted into a peaceful slumber. The Duke gently removed the hair clip from her head. In her sleep, Yilin instinctively grasped her father's hand. Looking at his sleeping daughter, the usually cold and ruthless Duke felt a surprising surge of tenderness. Night passed. Yilin awoke with a start, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar surroundings. Where's she? Suddenly, the appearance of her father, the Duke, made her jump. She remembered the events of the previous night. She had gotten lost and wandered into his room. But how had she ended up sleeping in the Duke's bed? The Duke simply said, Your arm. Yilin obediently extended her arm. The Duke touched her wrist with a light tap, casting a spell. A glowing mark instantly appeared on her skin. This mansion is protected by magic. Only those with the mark can find their way around. Understanding dawned on Yilin. That explained why she kept ending up in strange places. The Duke continued, My room is on the 3rd floor, right-hand corridor, the opposite side from yours. Yilin's eyes widened. He was telling her not to wander into the wrong room again. His daughter's bewildered expression softened the Duke's heart, though his face remained impassive. He instructed her to return that afternoon. He had something to ask her. Yilin quietly returned to her own room. Several maids rushed towards her. Fina's face was filled with concern. Your sudden disappearance worried me sick. I'm so sorry. I should have told you about the mansions. Yilin, now bearing the magical mark, quickly apologized for sneaking out. But I have the mark now. I'm not afraid to go out anymore. The maids were astonished. Even the young masters weren't granted the mark until they were at least 10 years old. The master must truly cherish you, miss, one of them remarked. Yilin thought wryly. If that's what he calls cherishing, I'd hate to see what not cherishing nourishing looks like. But what did her father want to ask her? There are few things more embarrassing than being in a serious situation and having your stomach rumble loudly. This particular incident went back a few days. The Duke had asked Yilin to attend an important internal meeting. Now, she sat stiffly in the meeting room, her face a mask of nervous apprehension. All eyes were on her, the whispers unconcealed. So she's the Duke's long-lost daughter he went to such lengths to find. Why is she here in the meeting room? Sensing his daughter's unease, Duke Gray called for silence. Then, softening his gaze, he looked down at Yilin. "Just tell us again what you told me a few days ago," he said gently. Yilin clenched her hands beneath the table, silently encouraging herself. "I can do this." She began to recount her time at Count Simon's estate, detailing the people she had encountered. Thanks to her sharp memory, the assembled listeners gleaned a wealth of information about the inner workings of the Count's household. But as Yilin spoke, her stomach began to rumble, plunging the room into sudden silence. Yilin's face flushed crimson. She cursed her habit of snacking. How could her stomach growl at such a moment? Unbeknownst to her, however, the innocent sound had charmed the entire room. The Duke, surprised that a child would get hungry during such a serious meeting, immediately ordered the servants to bring some suitable refreshments. This only deepened Yilin's embarrassment. How could she possibly eat while everyone was in the middle of a meeting? Her straightforward father, unable to comprehend her hesitation, wondered if she feared the food was poisoned. He picked up a plate, speared a strawberry with a fork, and ate it. "It's safe, Yilin," he reassured her. For the first time, Yilin felt a flicker of her father's awkward affection. While her reluctance wasn't due to fear of poison, she felt a strange sense of relief. Ignoring the stares of the others, she began to eat. From that day forward, the Duke made it a point to dine with Yilin every day, and each time, he would personally sample her food first. This unusual behavior sparked a flurry of gossip. The notoriously cold Duke doing this? Although Yilin didn't understand her father's misconception, his actions made her feel both awkward and secure. She remembered her time at Count Simon's estate, where she'd often been forced to taste every dish in the dining hall. The memory made her shudder. She had been so afraid of food back then. Lost in thought, the Duke suddenly spoke. "Tomorrow, we'll go to inspect the orchard. It will be part of your domain. What is it like to have such a straightforward father?" Yilin wondered. He had completely misinterpreted her shyness in front of the others. He thought she feared poison, so he tasted her food. One moment, he was fussing over her meal. The next, he was talking about taking her to inspect her domain. Yilin was baffled by her father's peculiar train of thought. It wasn't until Fina explained the situation that Yilin understood. The Duke had noticed the flicker of envy in her eyes when she had described Count Simon's daughter's orchard. He had seen that small detail and, in response, had purchased a new plot of land to create an orchard just for her. Yilin was suddenly filled with anticipation for tomorrow's visit. Later, after Yilin had gone to bed, the maids gathered to talk. Their master was far more affectionate than they had imagined. Fina recalled the day Yilin had arrived, and how the Duke's eyes had turned to ice when she reported the scars on the young girl's body. He had looked murderous. The maids whispered amongst themselves, unaware that the very subject of their conversation was standing just outside the door. And even more surprising, the Duke had a request for them. The next day arrived quickly. It was Yilin's first outing to the countryside, and she was filled with wonder. Even a simple wildflower by the roadside could capture her attention for half an hour. Seeing his daughter's delight, the Duke didn't insist she stay by his side, allowing her to explore freely with the maids. Free from her father's watchful eye, Yilin was ecstatic. Thanks to the Duke's powerful magic, the orchard, though located in the typically harsh north, was perpetually bathed in springtime warmth. Yilin ate fresh fruit, watched beautiful butterflies flit by, and even rode a small pony. Even the large dogs, which might have frightened other children, seemed adorable to her. As lunchtime approached, a voice called out from nearby, "Miss Yilin, lunch is ready." A delicious and beautifully arranged spread of food covered the picnic blanket. Only one dish, a plate of dark, oddly smelling biscuits, looked unappetizing. Yilin picked one up hesitantly. "Fina," a hushed voice reminded her, "this was made for you by the Duke himself." It turned out that last night, the Duke had sought out the maids, inquiring about simple foods he could prepare himself. This hopelessly straightforward father, in his own mind, reasoned that the little girl would only eat food he had personally made for her. Now, dear viewers, can you guess whether the young lady will appreciate this culinary experiment? As the Empire's greatest villain, how does this clueless father express his love for his daughter? Apparently, by painstakingly crafting a loving dish for her with his own two hands. Only, the results seem to have gone slightly awry. Yilin lifted the blackened biscuit, her heart filled with a profound sense of rejection. But a glance from the corner of her eye revealed Duke Gray, her father, sitting beside her, watching her with an almost hopeful expression. She forced herself to take a bite. Was this even fit for human consumption? She offered a strained smile. It's delicious. Returning the gesture, she picked up a donut and offered it to her father. Here, you have some too. This is very good. Receiving food from someone for the first time, the Duke was deeply touched. His other 3 children. His eldest son looked down on him, his second son only defied him, and his youngest cried at the mere sight of him. This little girl, however, was different. On their way back, the Duke asked Yilin if she liked the orchard. This opened the floodgates for Yilin. She declared her love for everything about the orchard, describing its breathtaking beauty, comparing it to a glass conservatory. The Duke's expression shifted slightly. Have you been to the glass conservatory? Fearful of her father's anger at her wandering, Yilin quickly explained that she had stumbled upon it while lost. The Duke's concern, however, stemmed from the dangerous creatures housed within the conservatory. He feared for his daughter's safety. Furthermore, it was protected by a barrier that only he could penetrate. Yilin's eyes widened. She had simply walked right in, and the boy who had guided her, he seemed unusual too. Returning from the orchard, Yilin, restless with boredom, turned her attention to painting. She made her way to the gallery, hoping to study the art of painting. She had heard that the Duke's 3 sons would soon be returning. It was said they were all ill-tempered, cruel, and vicious, and that they had a strained relationship with their father. She wondered if she would be able to get along with them. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss, did you come out here by yourself?" Yilin froze. It was clearly one of the mansion's ghostly servants. Despite Fina's explanations that they were spirits bound to the Duke's mansion, a child's fear of ghosts was instinctive. The more concerned the spirits seemed, the faster she ran. "Miss, you mustn't run in that direction. There are dangerous things there." Only after coming to a standstill did Yilin recall the ghost's warning. What dangerous things could be lurking here? She was the esteemed daughter of the Duke, yet she was constantly being frightened into panicked flight by the servants. And all because these servants were ghosts bound to the Duke's mansion. To escape them, Yilin found herself in a secluded courtyard. She vaguely remembered the ghostly servant's warning about something dangerous here. But looking around, it seemed like an ordinary courtyard. Within the courtyard, a tree was laden with apples, red as rubies. Then a voice spoke. Lost again, Yilin looked up. A familiar figure perched on a branch. It was the same boy who had guided her before. Yilin's gaze was drawn to the boy, but it was the bright red apple in his hand that truly captivated her. At that moment, her stomach rumbled traitorously. Unlike her previous shyness, Yilin now felt emboldened. "Give me an apple too." The boy refused. "This is my apple tree." "You actually believe that?" Seeing her dumbfounded expression, the boy chuckled softly. Yilin realized she had been tricked. Indignant, she turned to leave. The boy stopped her. "Spread out your skirt and take 3 steps forward." A moment later, several apples tumbled down, landing on the girl's skirt. The boy leapt down from the tree. He offered her the largest, roundest apple from the branch. They sat beneath the afternoon sun, sharing the fruit. The boy asked the young girl her name. Yilin replied that she didn't have one yet. She, in turn, asked for her companion's name. "My name might be a little long for you," he said, "so you can call me Chien." Yilin was about to ask him why he had been by the lake the other day, but when she looked up, the boy had vanished once more. Suddenly, a voice called out from behind her, "Little one." Duke Gray, her father, was walking toward her. "What are you doing here all alone?" Yilin scrambled to her feet, scattering the apples from her skirt. The Duke stared intently at his daughter. "It's almost dinner time, and you're eating apples?" Yilin offered him one of the fallen apples. "You should try one, father. They're delicious." The Duke's stern expression softened immediately. It seemed this tactic worked wonders on the straightforward Duke. Just as they were sharing this tender moment, a servant hurried towards them. "Your Grace," he announced, "Count Semond has come to visit." Count Semond, who had verbally abused and mistreated the girl he had raised from childhood, now put on a display of false affection. His sudden change of heart stemmed solely from the fact that the girl's true father, the most powerful duke in the empire, was standing right beside her. Yilin was terrified. Her mouth opened and closed, but she couldn't bring herself to refuse the Count's embrace. The Duke, noticing his daughter's distress, scowled at the Count. "Isn't it rather inappropriate," he said, "to rush up and embrace my daughter without a word of greeting?" The Duke's words gave the Count an opportunity to perform. He immediately feigned nervousness, claiming he was simply overcome with emotion at seeing Yilin after so long. The Duke, however, saw through the Count's duelia performance. He led him to the drawing room. Once they were seated, the Duke dispensed with pleasantries. "My daughter," he stated bluntly, "doesn't seem to have fared well at your estate. What explanation do you have for this?" The Count immediately began to defend himself. "The young lady lived very well in my home," he insisted. "However, she left without a word and was subsequently kidnapped. That admittedly is my fault." While the Count's explanation was technically flawless, the Duke didn't believe a word of it. "Is that so?" he countered. "Then why, at her age, can she neither read nor write? And why hasn't she learned to play any instruments? Furthermore, her hands bear the marks of hard labor." The cunning Count began to refute each point, desperately trying to prove how well he had treated Yilin. "The young lady has always been frail," he explained. "I believe her health was more important than her studies, so she often played outdoors. Naturally, her skin would become somewhat rough. And while the young lady lived a life of privilege in our home, she took a greater interest in the food and clothing of the servants." The Count's fabricated lies enraged Yilin. "I have to tell the Duke he's lying," she thought. But when she looked up, she met the Count's gaze. Memories of past abuse flooded back, and fear consumed her. Instinctively, she nodded. The Count beamed. "You see? The young lady agrees." He then continued to insinuate that Yilin often lied for attention, magnanimously forgiving her for such childish mistakes. Seeing that the Duke seemed to have no further questions, the Count assumed he had successfully deceived him. However, he knew his evasiveness wouldn't hold up for long. What would his next move be? The Duke remained seated in the drawing room, not believing a single word the Count had said. He had already interrogated the Count's maids and obtained evidence of the Count's cruel treatment of his daughter. How would he punish this liar? The ghostly servants, usually figures Yilin avoided, now appeared in her room of their own accord. They had discovered a shocking secret. Following their guidance, Yilin reached a corner and saw two figures conspiring in the shadows. It was Count Semond, giving instructions to another man. Listening closely, Yilin realized the Count had bribed the Duke's chef to poison his food. Overcome with shock, Yilin made a sound, alerting the Count to her presence. Seeing Count Semond rushing towards her, Yilin instinctively froze, fear gripping her once more. Thankfully, the ghostly servants, ever loyal, remained by her side. They quickly enveloped her in a shimmering, transparent bubble, effectively rendering her invisible. The next morning, Yilin hurried to her father's chambers. Despite Duke Gray's fearsome reputation, a man who had taken countless lives, he had not only saved her, but had also shown her a unique tenderness. She desperately wanted him to be safe. Breathlessly, she reached her father and recounted everything she had overheard the previous night. She detailed how the Count had bribed the chef to poison the food and promised him a position in the royal palace kitchens. She explained that the poison was so potent, even her father, immune to most toxins, would succumb to its effects. The Duke's face darkened. He immediately ordered the steward to bring the prepared meal to the dining hall. He also summoned Count Semond, who was still lurking in his room. Yilin was bewildered by her father's actions, assuming he didn't believe her. After all, the Count had just yesterday accused her of being a liar. She sat nervously at the table, listening to the Count's false pleasantries. Panic gnawed at her. How could she convince her father of the truth? The Duke suddenly spoke. "Count Semond, you were right. My daughter lied to me this morning, trying to get my attention." The Count beamed, clearly pleased with the perceived success of his manipulation. Despite her father's misunderstanding, Yilin felt no anger. Instead, her mind raced, desperately seeking a way to save him. Perhaps she could knock over his plate when the food arrived. She might be scolded, but the next moment, the maids placed all the poisoned dishes before Count Semond. The Duke's expression was grim. "My daughter tells me you bribed the chef to poison the food. To prove she's lying, I ask you to eat every dish." The The Count's eyes widened. He hadn't anticipated his meticulously crafted plan to unravel so quickly. Now, it was his turn to taste the bitter tang of fear. Only moments ago, he had reveled in the success of driving a wedge between the Duke and his daughter. Now, terror choked him. His treacherous scheme had been exposed. The Duke commanded him to consume the poisoned food. The Count stammered, claiming a dislike for the vegetables. Yilin's indignation flared. You told the chef to poison the food. Her father's trust emboldened her. I'm not a liar. The Count's face turned a sickly green. He opened his mouth to retort, but the Duke cut him off with an icy voice. It seems you've raised my daughter to be an ill-mannered fool. Take him to the dungeons. I'll interrogate him myself. Later, sitting on her bed, sleep eluded Yilin. She wouldn't have to see the dreadful Count summoned again. He was locked away in the dungeons now. She almost wanted to see him brought low. Suddenly, a voice whispered in her ear. Would you like to see him? Xian had appeared in her room, seemingly out of thin air. The dark-haired boy possessed a strange magnetism that disarmed Yilin completely. He extended his hand. As Yilin touched his hand, the world around her dissolved into darkness. In an instant, they were in the dungeons. Angry voices echoed nearby. She recognized Count Semond and her father. Yilin quickly ducked behind a pillar. Surely, her father, with his powerful magic, would sense their presence at such close proximity. Xian smiled faintly. Don't worry. As long as we hold hands, no one will recognize you. Yilin was puzzled. Xian could shield her from her father's magic? Just who was he? The Count's frantic cries drew her attention back to the scene unfolding before her. The Duke's voice was glacial. If you couldn't care for my daughter, you should have simply returned her to me. I was a fool to trust you simply because you were my subordinate. Every time I came to see her, you claimed she was traveling or ill. I was ashamed to face her. So I never questioned your excuses. At his words, Yilin froze, utterly stunned. It turned out her father hadn't forgotten or abandoned her. She had always been in his thoughts. Tears instantly welled up in her eyes. Back in her room, tears still glistened in Rosette's eyes. Xian gently bid her good night. Blushing, Xian disappeared. Lying in bed, Rosette couldn't sleep. Everything that had happened today left her restless. Clutching her pillow, she knocked on her father's door. The Duke seemed flustered. I don't know any lullabies, he admitted. Rosette blinked. It's okay, I know some. What had happened? Already a man of vast knowledge, the Duke began to delve into books on childcare. Since the Count Semond incident, and learning of all the suffering Rosette had endured, everyone in the Duke's mansion treated her with even greater care and concern. Even bath time became a flurry of helping hands, each eager to assist. Rosette noticed that the scars on her body were almost gone. It seemed the Duke had specifically sought medicine from the royal palace for his daughter. The specially prepared medicine was indeed effective. Rosette's childhood trauma seemed to be fading along with the scars on her body. She became even more lively and adorable. After she was washed and dressed, the Duke sent for her. This surprised Rosette. She had told her father everything that had happened at Count Semond's estate. What else could he want to talk about? Entering the Duke's study, Rosette froze. The floor was covered, layer upon layer, with stacks of books and documents. Her father seemed to be discussing something with his assistant. Seeing his daughter, the Duke told her to play for a while. Rosette obediently sat on a settee, wondering, are they working? Then why did he call me here? Suddenly, the Duke spoke. Operetta. Before Rosette could react, he shook his head. No, that won't do. Ballet is no good either. And I don't like Peoria. Rosette finally understood. They were choosing a name for her. The assistant offered several more suggestions, all of which the Duke dismissed. Rosette stifled a giggle. She hadn't realized her erudite father was so inept at naming. Still, his dedication warmed a corner of her heart. Time passed. The discussion continued. He glanced at his daughter. Rosette had fallen asleep on the sofa. The Duke gently lifted her, preparing to carry the sleepy child back to her room. Passing the window, he noticed a bush of roses in full bloom outside. They were summer roses, the symbol of the Wind's Gray family. He thought his wife as radiant as a rose. Gently placing Rosette on her bed, the Duke stroked her pink hair, the same shade as his late wife's. Sweet dreams, Rosette. Yes, Summer Rose had another, older name, Rosetista. From that day forward, the little girl had a name, Rosette Windsgray. What's it like to have a powerful, doting father? It's probably like this. If his daughter sneezes, he's ready to use all his magic to change the temperature of the entire city. Ever since Giannis's visit to the mansion and his instructions to take good care of Rosette, everyone's attentiveness towards her had become even more extreme. Not only was she accompanied 24/7, but they even wanted to carry her everywhere, afraid that a few steps might tire her out. When Rosette suggested playing hide-and-seek, the maids, of course, immediately agreed. So they all went out to the courtyard and started the game. However, upon returning that evening, they were met with the Duke's scowling face. Rosette had caught a chill while playing outside and now had a fever. The Duke was about to reprimand the maids, but his daughter stopped him, insisting that going outside had been her own idea. The Duke sank into thought for a moment. The temperature in this territory is indeed quite low. It truly isn't suitable for a child. Very well, I shall simply adjust the temperature of the entire territory. With that, he began to cast a spell. His aide, watching from the side, grew frantic. Your Grace, he cautioned, using climate magic on the territory could have dire consequences. If the temperature changes suddenly, the residents won't have time to adapt. It will undoubtedly disrupt their livelihoods. The Duke, however, remained unconcerned. Then we shall provide compensation. Resolve the issue immediately. Observing the aide sweating profusely, Rosette thought to herself, I must stop father. She reached out and tugged on the Duke's sleeve, softly calling out, Papa. No one had ever addressed him in such a way before. The Duke froze, utterly taken aback. Rosette pressed on with her sweet plea. Then, could you just make our home a little warmer? That will be enough. I usually only play in the courtyard anyway. The doting father immediately withdrew his magic and instructed his daughter, if you wish to leave the Duke's manor, you must tell me beforehand. Rosette nodded. Okay, Papa. The icy Duke smiled for the first time. It seemed the word Papa had a profound impact on him. After this incident, the still ailing Rosette was confined to indoor activities. Suddenly, a butterfly caught her eye. She reached out to catch it, but her foot slipped. She tumbled over the second-floor railing. Before she could scream, she felt a tall figure shielding her from behind. Who could this be? The girl, in her attempt to catch a butterfly, had accidentally fallen. As she fell, a tall figure caught her in his arms. After they landed, the person behind her spoke. I'm sorry. I only meant to play a joke, but I didn't expect to put you in danger. Rosette was stunned. It was Chien, but just now a much taller figure had shielded her. Looking into his sincere eyes, she began to doubt her own perception. Still, it was surprising that the butterfly had actually been Chi and in disguise. This reminded her of her conversation with her father. She had asked the Duke if there was a black-haired, red-eyed boy named Chi in the manor. The Duke, in his overprotective manner, had declared that there was no such person and demanded to know if that boy had done anything to her. Frightened, Rosette hadn't dared to pursue the topic. But since her father didn't know him, he certainly wasn't a guest of the manor, and he was clearly capable of avoiding the Duke's surveillance. Rosette voiced her suspicion. Chien, you're not human, are you? Chien didn't hesitate. You discovered me. I'm a spirit. The spirits Rosette had imagined usually had pointed ears and fluttering wings. She had never encountered a spirit like Chien. Chien patiently explained that there were many kinds of spirits. He emphasized, regardless of what kind of spirit I am, I won't harm you. Recalling her previous interactions with Chien, Rosette realized he had always been helping her. She immediately relaxed. They then went to the glass greenhouse. Chien intended to show Rosette around, but she hesitated. After all, her father had said that the lake held a sealed stigma sublord. Chien gently took her hand. Don't worry, the things here are all afraid of me, so you won't be in any danger. Together, they walked through the greenhouse. Strange things occasionally emerged from within the beautiful garden. Chien explained, these are stigma subspecies. Stigmas are the monsters of this world. Some are born as stigmas. Others gain their aura and are reborn, transformed into stigmas. And during this transformation process, those that fail become stigma subspecies. Originally, the Wind's Grey Duchy was a desolate, frigid wasteland. The previous Duke Grey lost a war against the royal family. He was driven to the desolate north, the region most heavily infested with stigmas. Unexpectedly, the Grey family conquered this land, becoming the Empire's bulwark against the stigmas. Not only that, but the Wind's Grey family also tamed the stigma subspecies, using them to deter the royal family. Having explained the background of the stigma subspecies, Chien finished showing Rosette around the glass greenhouse. That concludes today's tour. You should head back now. Someone is looking for you. Who could be looking for me? They were biological siblings who had never met. Rumor had it the brothers possessed terrible tempers, vicious and cruel antagonists. What would Rosette's first encounter with them be like? With her heart full of apprehension, Rosette walked into her father, the Duke's, study. The moment she entered, 3 pairs of eyes swiveled towards her. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her 2 brothers looked much older than in the portrait she had seen. They must find her a stranger too. Will they get along? The eldest brother took the initiative, walking over and crouching down in front of Rosette. He bore a striking resemblance to their father, the Duke, even sharing the same frosty expression. "You're so small," he observed, "but you have such big eyes." He reached out and took Rosette's small hand, a friendly smile gracing his lips. "Hello, I'm your eldest brother, Abel. I've really missed you." His straightforward declaration caught Rosette off guard. Looking up, she found another pair of eyes fixed intently upon her. Her second brother, Camelon, had appeared beside them at some point. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm your second brother, Camelon," he said, reaching out and scooping Rosette into his arms with effortless strength. Seeing the slight alarm in his sister's expression, Camelon beamed. He spun around with Rosette in his arms, joyfully exclaiming, "My sister! This is my sister!" His excitement was infectious. "Those guys at the academy are always showing off their sisters," he declared, "but my sister is way cuter than theirs." The Duke approached the trio. "As you just heard," he said, his voice softer now, "these are your 2 brothers. Your third brother, Kylie's, will return in 2 days. I'll introduce you then." Rosette offered a sweet smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you both. I'm Rosette. I look forward to getting to know you." This gesture instantly melted the hearts of the 3 men present. The Duke addressed his sons. "From now on, you don't need to come to the palace unless necessary. Just stay at the estate." His tone, cold and clipped, was a stark contrast to the gentle way he spoke to his daughter. Rosette lowered her head slightly, sensing the sudden shift in atmosphere. "This is a bit tense, isn't it?" she thought. Camelon suddenly spoke up. "Father, may we take Rosette out?" The Duke nodded curtly. "Take good care of your sister," he ordered. Given permission, Camelon happily darted towards his sister. Before leaving, Rosette politely addressed her father. "Father, I'll be back soon." The Duke's expression softened immediately. "All right, go and have fun." This sudden display of tenderness nearly made his son's jaws drop. "Seriously, Your Grace," they thought, "could you be any more obvious about your favoritism?" He had just been cold and commanding towards them, and in the next second, he was beaming at his daughter. But then again, he was the one and only, the universe's biggest daughter-doting dad. Fortunately, the sons were long accustomed to their father's aloofness. Pour one out for the sons, the narrator sympathized. The 3 arrived at the garden. The once snow-covered landscape was now lush and green. Rosette told her brothers about their father's previous plan to use climate magic to change the temperature of the entire territory. Camelon confided in his sister, expressing his amusement at their father's boldness. Seeing her second brother's friendly demeanor, Rosette felt a warmth spread through her. She glanced at her eldest brother, Abel, who remained silent. Whenever the topic of their father arose, he seemed to withdraw. It seemed the rumors about his disdain for the Duke were true. Suddenly, Camelon's eyes lit up. "I know. Abel, let's give Rosette a nickname. Everyone at the academy calls their sisters by nicknames." Abel readily agreed, demonstrating the harmony between the brothers. And so, the 2 engaged in a serious discussion about what nickname to bestow upon their sister. Finally, they settled on Rosie. Although Rosette found her brother's behavior a bit childish, it warmed her heart. She immediately began brainstorming nicknames for them in return. Abel became AI, and Camelon was dubbed Millie. Rosette was clearly quite pleased with her own naming prowess. Seeing their sister's delight, the brothers naturally accepted their new nicknames. Abel gently stroked Rosette's head. "Rosette, you can call me whatever you like, but you can't use my nickname when others are around," Abel stated, noticing Rosette's puzzled expression. He continued, "Our family has a notorious reputation within the Empire. Countless people want us dead. Therefore, we must never reveal our true feelings or allow anyone to see our vulnerabilities." Listening to Abel's explanation, Rosette began to understand the icy atmosphere that permeated their home. Their father, the Duke, maintained a strict and distant demeanor with each of his sons to avoid appearing weak. The children, with no outlet for their emotions and harboring a deep fear of their father, became increasingly isolated. It was a truly pitiable situation. conversation. Seeing the somber expression on Rosette's face, Abel worried that his words had reminded her of her past with Count Simon. He quickly apologized. Rosette, momentarily stunned, realized that he knew about what had happened with the Count. The rumors painted Abel as a cold-blooded, ruthless monster, but his sensitivity revealed a different reality. Clearly, rumors couldn't be entirely trusted. She offered a quick smile. "It's all right. Count Simon received his just punishment. I'm not afraid of him anymore." Relieved by their sister's smile, the brothers continued walking. They approached a glass greenhouse in the distance. Suddenly remembering something, Rosette asked, Do you know Chien?" She recalled the gentle spirit who had saved her on several occasions. The enigmatic youth's origins remained a mystery. No one knew his true background. Even her brothers, who had lived in the mansion for years, seemed unaware of his existence. Assuming Chien was a figment of their sister's imagination, the brothers dismissed her question. Rosette fell into deep thought. Just who was Chien? Later that night, Rosette awoke to get a drink of water. She noticed a light emanating from a nearby doorway. A wispy form drifted out. Rosette jumped back in fright. A veiled female ghost stood before her. "Good morning, miss," the ghost greeted. Still shaken, Rosette thought to herself, could anyone encountering a ghost possibly have a good morning? Sensing her fear, the ghost sincerely apologized and offered to take her somewhere. Despite her fear, Rosette agreed to the ghost's request. After her previous experiences, she realized these spectral servants meant her no harm. She followed closely behind the ghost. Outside, the full moon shone brightly. It was said that on the night of the full moon, magical power was at its peak. Therefore, on this night, the ghost servants were empowered, able to materialize even without their master's permission. They eagerly awaited the chance to present themselves to Rosette. A door quietly opened, revealing a brightly lit room. A line of servants stood before Rosette, bowing respectfully. The lead ghost, Annabella, the housekeeper of the spectral servants, introduced each of them. "Though it's a bit late, we wanted to gather today and offer you our greetings. Welcome home, Mississippi." The servants began to play music. The chef presented carefully prepared desserts. Rosette happily enjoyed the festivities, her previous fear of the ghost servants completely gone. Annabella, the housekeeper, suddenly spoke. "Miss, is that dangerous individual still approaching you?" Rosette paused, recalling the servant's earlier warnings. "Are you talking about Chien?" she asked. The room fell silent. Annabella's voice was grave. "That ferocious beast. He even told you his name? He's truly dangerous. I can't tell you everything, but you mustn't go near him again." Rosette was confused. Who was Chien, really? Annabella continued. "We are all defeated by his hand. We've entered into a pact with him. He doesn't want us to tell you too much about him. But I can tell you one thing, Mississippi. Please remember his eyes." Just then, the door slammed open with a bang. Who could it be? What happened next? The cold-blooded, ruthless Duke, his face flushed red, was as shy as a young girl. Rewind half an hour. The ghost servants were holding a welcome banquet for Rosette. Just as everyone was enjoying themselves, the door slammed open. The Duke stood there, his face cold. "It's the middle of the night. What have you done to my daughter?" The atmosphere instantly froze. The young maid, Rosette, rushed forward to explain to her father, the Duke. The servants were only acting this way to welcome her home. The Duke gently lifted his daughter into his arms. Even so, there's a proper time and place. They shouldn't be keeping a child up in the middle of the night. He sounded remarkably like a parenting expert. It had to be said, Dr. Ennis's parenting classes were proving remarkably effective. The Duke carried Rosette back to her room. He stroked her head. "I still have work to do tonight, so I can't tuck you in. I'll see you in the morning." Rosette looked up at her father, reaching out a small hand to tug gently on his sleeve. He leaned down and planted a goodnight kiss on her cheek. Receiving his daughter's first kiss, the Duke's face flushed crimson. It was Rosette's first time expressing affection to her family, and she shyly covered her face. It seemed that the tendency to blush ran in the family. The Duke smiled warmly. "Thank you, Rosette. Sweet dreams. By the way, Kylie should be returning tomorrow. I'll introduce you to your third brother then. He has a peculiar personality. His nickname is Mad Dog. What would tomorrow's meeting bring?" The next morning, Rosette recounted the ghostly gathering of the previous night to her two brothers, Abel and Camelon. The Duke's arrival silenced the dining room. Rosette ate her breakfast, observing her silent brothers. The family dynamics seemed strained, to say the least. After the meal, the servants brought out dessert, strawberry cake, compared to the other dishes, which were exquisitely presented. The strawberry cake looked rather rustic. The brothers began to comment on this particular pastry. Rosette quickly interrupted, turning to the Duke with a sweet smile. "Papa, did you make today's dessert too?" The Duke nodded. "Yes, partly to prevent another poisoning incident like last time, and partly because Rosette is a bit picky about her food." So, the Duke had become his daughter's personal pastry chef. His sons were speechless. "Well," Abel sighed, "might as well accept it. To father, sons are just weeds by the roadside." Rosette happily enjoyed her father's creation. Suddenly, a servant announced Kylie's return. What kind of sparks would fly from Rosette's first meeting with her third brother? Would they be the kind of siblings who started bickering at first sight? Unlike the initial friendliness shown by her other two brothers, Kylie's reaction to meeting Rosette was decidedly cold. He even feigned ignorance, asking, "Who's this little runt?" The term stunned Rosette. She could practically picture what a runt looked like. Camelon immediately jumped to her defense. "Who are you calling a runt? Our little sister is just petite." Kylie's ignored him, addressing the Duke with suspicion. "Father, have you thoroughly confirmed her identity? Are you sure she's really ours? Could she be a plant from another family trying to exploit our influence?" The Duke's face darkened. He cut Kylie's off and ordered him to return to his room and reflect on his words. The rebellious Kylie's remained silent, but as he turned to leave, he shot Rosette a cold glare. Abel and Camelon, fearing their sister might be upset, declared their intention to give Kylie's a piece of their mind later. Rosette, eager to quell their anger, quickly assured them that she didn't mind. Camelon couldn't resist pulling his distressed sister into a hug, mentally flaying the Duke, who had mistreated Rosette in her previous life, alive 1,000 times over. Rosette, however, felt no sadness in this moment, enveloped as she was by a wave of love. That night, lying in bed, Rosette recalled Kylie's questioning of her identity. It stung a little, but she understood his skepticism. After being gone for 7 years, her sudden return was bound to be met with some disbelief. Her thoughts then drifted to Chien. She still didn't know who he was. Even her family claimed they'd never seen such a boy. Perhaps, as her brother suggested, he was just an imaginary friend. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Abel entered. He offered to read Rosette a bedtime story. And so, this rather intimidating yet tender scene unfolded. However, Abel's choice of story about a monster under the bed was perhaps not the most appropriate for a young child. Seeing his little sister seemed a bit frightened, Abel comforted her, saying that if there really were a monster, he would definitely protect her. Soon, the pleasant yet terrifying bedtime story was over. After Abel left, the little maid lay alone in bed. Suddenly, a thud echoed from under the bed. Rosette shot up from the bed. She remembered the monster under the bed that Abel had just described and felt terrified. Trembling, she sat on the bed, thinking, there's definitely nothing under there. Or maybe I should just take a peek to make sure. So, she leaned down and peered under the bed. A pair of red eyes gleamed in the darkness. Have you ever seen someone tell a horror story to lull a child to sleep? This clueless older brother was probably the first in history. After listening to her brother's bedtime story, Rosette found herself even more wide awake. Then, a thud came from under the bed. The trembling little maid looked down. A pair of red eyes appeared under the bed. Rosette screamed, alerting the Duke, her father, in the next room. He rushed into the room and saw his daughter with tears in her eyes. He held the sobbing Rosette in his arms. Her brothers, alerted by the commotion, also rushed in. Clinging to her father, Rosette choked out that there was something under the bed. The Duke immediately ordered his sons to search thoroughly. After a thorough search, they found nothing. Rosette explained that a monster with glowing red eyes had appeared under the bed. The non-believing men froze. Guilt washed over Abel's face. Well, actually, I was telling my sister a fairy tale. Maybe she dreamt about the monster in the story. The Duke scolded his son for causing unnecessary trouble. The already strained relationship between father and son grew even tenser. Rosette quickly interjected, saying she was happy that her brother had told her a story. And everyone came to see me. I'm not scared anymore. Papa and Abel, Camelon, and Kylie's, thank you. As soon as she finished speaking, Kylie's bristled. Who are you calling Kylie's, you little brat? Abel, still feeling guilty, said he wouldn't tell his sister such a scary story again. However, the protective Duke, her father, immediately interrupted. There won't be a next time. Seeing the atmosphere freeze over again, Rosette became anxious. She couldn't let the rift between father and son widen. She had to resort to her ultimate weapon. She leaned in and kissed Abel on the forehead. "Thank you, brother." Abel's face flushed crimson. Rosette looked at her father. It wasn't Abel's fault there was a monster. "If you scold him, I won't kiss you anymore." This threat was devastating to the Duke. His expression softened immediately. He told his son to be more careful when choosing stories in the future. Camelon chimed in, asking for a kiss from his sister too. Kylie sighed and quietly left, exasperated by his brother's antics. Worried that Rosette was still scared, Camelon and Abel enthusiastically invited her to sleep with them. The Duke didn't say anything, but his grip on his daughter tightened. Rosette understood what he meant. "Thank you, both of you, but I'm going to sleep with Papa tonight. Papa is the strongest. I won't be scared at all if I sleep with him." A once distant and oppressive family had become harmonious and warm, all thanks to the return of their clever and kind little daughter, who had resolved one family crisis after another. Even after the monster under the bed incident, Rosette couldn't forget those glowing red eyes. Based on her limited experience in this household, she knew there was only one suspect if something strange happened. So she went to the glass greenhouse and called out for Chien. Sure enough, Chien appeared behind her shortly after. He asked with a smile, "What brings you here?" Rosette got straight to the point. "Were you the monster under my bed last night?" Chien's expression faltered. Then he gave his usual harmless smile. "You just figured that out? Although your reaction is a bit slow, I'm still happy you recognized me." The young maid, Rosette, was puzzled. "Why did you try to frighten me?" A flicker of disappointment crossed Chien's face. "Because I'm a little upset. You actually said I was an imaginary friend." Rosette's heart skipped a beat. She had muttered those words to herself in her room. How could he possibly know? Chien cupped her face in his hands. "I'm real. Can't you see? I'm right here in front of you. But I didn't mean to make you cry. I apologize." Rosette felt his strangely cold hands. Those red eyes seemed to be boring into her again. She quickly pushed his hand away. "All right, I accept your apology, but you have to tell me who you really are." Chien fell silent, seemingly unsure how to answer. Suddenly, a voice rang out. "Hey, who gave you permission to be in the greenhouse?" Kylie's appeared behind them. Chien retorted instantly, "Where I go and what I do is none of your business." Rosette was completely bewildered. No one seemed to know Chien. How did Kylie's know him? Kylie's expression was stern. "I suggest you consider your position and circumstances before you act." "The Crown Prince." Rosette gasped. "Who's the Crown Prince?" Kylie's pointed at Chien, a little runt. "Who else could I be talking about besides him?" Rosette looked at the mysterious boy beside her. Chien's smile was as bright as ever. "Now you know who I am. Can we be friends now?" Rosette still couldn't believe it. "But I thought you were a spirit." Chien's smile widened. "Rosette, I adore this cute and innocent side of you." Kylie's abruptly interrupted their conversation. "Enough nonsense. You should leave now. Why would the Crown Prince be living in the Duke's mansion? And why was Kylie's so hostile towards him? He was the esteemed Crown Prince of the Empire. Yet he resided long-term in the remote, frigid Duke's mansion. Even the Duke's sons could yell at him. All because he was a hostage, a pawn used by the villainous Duke to control the imperial power. But was Chien telling the truth? Rosette thought back over recent events. Too many questions plagued her. First, the spectral servant's warning. Then, the series of strange occurrences she had witnessed. And before that, no one in the mansion had ever heard of Chien. Chien explained that he had been using magic. The reason others didn't know him was because he had only told Rosette his name. Everything he had done was simply to make Rosette less afraid of him. After hearing Chien's explanation, Rosette still had many doubts. Her two brothers were equally perplexed. They never imagined that the friend their sister spoke of was actually the Crown Prince, Camelon IV. Abel, not wanting his sister to interact further with the Crown Prince, swiftly pulled her to his side. Rosette looked at Chien. If what he said was true, he was merely a puppet, controlled by the Wind's Gray family under the guise of protection. Then he must hate our family, she thought. Just then, the Duke appeared behind them. He politely greeted the Crown Prince. "Your Highness, it seems you should be returning. Aunt Byral is going back to the Imperial Palace tomorrow and can escort you." Chien's tone was tinged with regret. "Must I go back so soon? What a shame." He looked at Rosette. "I finally managed to become friends with Rosette. His words made the atmosphere even heavier. The Duke became more determined to send the Crown Prince back. Once the others had moved away, Qian said to Rosette, "So, can you feel now that I'm not an imaginary friend?" Rosette, feeling much more at ease, admitted that she had always suspected Qi and wasn't human. Qian replied that there were many mysterious things in the world, as countless as the guardian stars. Rosette remembered the spectral servant's warning. Remember his eyes. She asked, "Are your red pupils also because of a blessing?" At her words, Qian's face paled. "Rosette, you saw the red glow in my eyes?" One moment, he was the picture of a polite, smiling gentleman. The next, his demeanor shifted, becoming dark and menacing. The girl had discovered his secret. His eyes glowed red. Though she didn't understand what was happening, Rosette realized from Qian's expression that she seemed to have said something wrong. She stammered, tried to explain that she only meant his eyes were bright and beautiful. Her flustered explanation betrayed her inner fear. Qian slowly approached. "Yes," he said, "you must have seen wrong." He gave his familiar smile. "Come to think of it, there's something I haven't told you yet, Rosette. Thank you for being my friend." Rosette took a step back, her eyes filled with fear. Qian took her hand, seemingly oblivious to her apprehension. "We should get along well from now on, too." The palace before them was magnificent, far grander and more imposing than the Duke's mansion. But Rosette couldn't appreciate it. She looked preoccupied, still pondering Qian's peculiar identity. Qian, acting the part of a gracious host, enthusiastically explained the palace to her. "Yes, this is the Imperial Palace. Why was Rosette here?" The story went back to yesterday. Qian, right in front of the Duke, had invited Rosette to visit the palace. He had finally made a friend and wanted His Majesty to meet her too. Rosette had been about to refuse when Qian mentioned that the Duke and her eldest brother would also be attending. She hesitated, and so the Duke and his 3 children found themselves within the palace walls. Why wasn't her eldest brother with them? Because poor Abel had been whisked away to the knight's order upon arrival. Thus, the Duke and his remaining family were escorted by the Crown Prince to meet the Emperor. The audience chamber was intimidatingly large. One had to approach the throne to see the elevated figure clearly. The Emperor sat upon his throne, a crown upon his head, his face etched with the weariness of age and an inviolable authority. The Duke and his family bowed before the Emperor. The Emperor waved a dismissive hand, signaling for everyone else to leave. Qian leaned close to Rosette and whispered, "From now on, no matter what happens, don't be too surprised." Once everyone else had departed, the Emperor cried out, "Henrietta," and practically scrambled down from his throne. He grasped the Duke's hands and began to whine. "I was just thinking of you. That Marquis Welton is bothering me again." He sounded like a child complaining to his parent. Apart from Rosette, the other children present seemed accustomed to this scene. They watched as the Emperor promised their father he would deal with Marquis Welton. Rosette finally understood. The Emperor was a weak, indecisive man. Rather than the Windsgrade Duke being the puppet master controlling the royal family, he was more like the Emperor's caretaker. At that moment, Qian quietly approached Rosette. "Rosette," he said, "let me show you around the palace." This outwardly imposing emperor was privately a crybaby. And the Duke, perceived as the power behind the throne, was actually the Emperor's support system. Except for Rosette, everyone else seemed unfazed by this display. While the adults talked, Crown Prince Qian invited Rosette on a tour of the palace. Once outside the audience chamber, Rosette asked him, "Is His Majesty always like that?" "Yes," Qian replied. "He ascended the throne as a servant's child. The Windsgrade Duke secured everything for him. So, naturally, he relies on the Duke for everything." Qian's tone was matter-of-fact, as if he were talking about someone else's affairs. But that made sense. After all, he was the Emperor's son. Only he could speak so frankly. They arrived at an exhibition hall filled with treasures, sculptures, and portraits of past royalty. Rosette was quickly captivated by a portrait of a boy. The boy in the painting had blonde hair and blue eyes. The faint smile on his lips seemed strangely familiar. Rosette gestured towards the portrait and asked Qian, "Who is this?" Qian seemed to think she was joking. "What are you talking about?" "That's me." Rosette froze. She looked back and forth between Qian and the portrait. None of the features matched Qian. A wave of fear washed over her. Qian, still smiling faintly, asked, "Do I look that different from the painting?" He took Rosette's hand. "Rosette," he said, "did you really see what I truly look like?" Rosette stared at this strange, yet familiar person. It seemed her perception hadn't been a mistake. Surprise flickered across Qian's face. Someone had actually seen his true form. The little maid, Rosette, was tugging at his hand, crying for help as she tried to run away. Suddenly, she collided head-on with a pink-haired boy, Kylie's, one of her older brothers. He grabbed her shoulder. "Rosette, where have you been? Father's looking for you." Before he could finish, Rosette hid behind him. "Brother, help me." Only then did Kylie's notice the crown prince standing nearby. His tone turned icy. "Qian," he demanded, "what's going on here?" Qian claimed he was just joking with the maid. Kylie's protectively shielded his sister. "Your Highness," he challenged, "how dare you bully someone from the House of Winds Grey?" This was the first time Rosette had seen him display such protective brotherly instincts. Rosette felt a surge of gratitude. It lasted only a second. He turned and rounded on her. "And you, why did you just let him bully you?" "So much for gratitude." Qian sighed, a look of resignation on his face. "Well, I suppose we can't make up today. I'll see you next time then." He was the Empire's most tsundere older brother figure. He usually treated his long-lost little sister with indifference, yet every time she was bullied, he would step in to defend her. Rosette, now privy to the Crown Prince's secret, huddled behind Kylie's. As Kylie's continued to shield her, he again demanded to know why Qian had bullied someone from the Duke's household. Qian's expression was one of weary resignation. "I'll see you next time, Rosette. I promise, whenever you think of me, I'll come find you." He turned and walked away. Rosette's small voice followed him. "Don't come find me. I don't want to be friends with you anymore." As Qian departed, Rosette's legs gave way, and she collapsed onto the floor. Kylie's tried to help her up, but she couldn't stand. She asked Kylie's to get help. Looking at his Zardida Meme, limp sister on the ground, a flicker of concern crossed Kylie's usually stoic face. He crouched down in front of her, silently offering her a piggyback ride. Rosette, accustomed to his cold demeanor, was momentarily taken aback. Kylie's, unused to showing such consideration, quickly became irritated. "Fine, don't get on." Rosette instantly backpedaled, assuring him that she wanted to. Once she was settled on his back, Kylie's, ever conscious of his image, warned her sternly not to tell anyone about this incident. Rosette readily agreed. The tension eased, and she ventured a question. "What's the Crown Prince's real name?" Kylie shrugged. "I don't know. Why would I know his name?" Rosette reconsidered. He had a point. Kylie's wasn't interested in people he didn't care about, and he probably wouldn't bother learning their names. The sight of Kylie's carrying Rosette on his back was quite a shock to the rest of the family. Even Camelon, her second oldest brother, was stunned. Rosette quickly hopped off Kylie's back, explaining that her legs hurt, which was why he had carried her. Abel, her eldest brother, scooped her up in his arms. He clearly doted on his little sister. Surrounded by her protective family, Rosette felt much better. Their father, the Duke, took her from Abel's arms. "All right, our business at the palace is concluded. Let's go home." Though slightly embarrassed to be carried in public, Rosette felt safe and secure in her father's embrace. She brought up the question again. "Father, do you know the Crown Prince's name?" "I don't," the Duke replied casually, as if not knowing the Crown Prince's name was the most normal thing in the world. But given the Duke's close relationship with the Emperor, how could he not know? Could you imagine that they were actually the same person? In everyone else's eyes, he was the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Imperial Crown Prince, the epitome of aristocratic elegance. But to Rosette, he was a mysterious, enigmatic youth with black hair and eyes that shifted colors. And it was strange that no one seemed to know the Crown Prince's name. Even stranger, everyone seemed to think it perfectly normal not to know. Rosette had searched every record, even consulted the Crown Prince's old wet nurse, but the answer was always the same. Lost in thought, Rosette sketched Qian's likeness on a piece of paper. When she finally looked up, she realized it was late. Oddly, the maids hadn't come to remind her about bedtime. She opened her door and peered out. The hallway was dark and deserted. A sense of unease settled over her. Calling out for the maids, she stepped into the hallway. Suddenly, she saw someone lying in a pool of blood. Using his last breath, the man urged the young maid, Rosette, to flee. Terror choked her scream. The Duke's mansion, fortified by her father's wards and magic, should have been impenetrable. How could it be under attack? Looking around, she saw the foot knights scattered across the floor, most likely dead. This was Kylie's room, her third eldest brother. Realizing Kylie's might be in danger, Rosette ran towards his room. The moment she opened the door, she saw a masked assassin, dagger raised, lunging towards Kylie's. Rosette grabbed a vase and hurled it at the attacker. The assassin released Kylie's throat. He gasped, urging his sister to fetch their father. But in the next instant, the assassin's hand clamped down on his neck again. Seeing Kylie's helpless, the assassin turned to Rosette. Even if you call the Duke, it's useless. Our men are already keeping him occupied. Fearing for his sister, Kylie's desperately lied, claiming he had no connection to the Duke's family. The assassin, unmoved, glared at him. Blame your father. Our employer just wants to live a little longer. He raised his dagger, poised to strike Rosette. Rosette closed her eyes, bracing for the inevitable. Suddenly, a gurgling sound stopped the assassin in his tracks. With a scream, he dissolved into a pool of blood before her eyes. Who could have possessed such power to obliterate a skilled assassin in an instant? The Duke's mansion, once protected by powerful magic, had become a slaughterhouse overnight, all because the Duke's sworn enemy had ordered the attack. She had seen the assassin's dagger aimed at her heart, only to watch him vanish into a bloody puddle. Rosette rushed to her unconscious brother's side and wept with relief and terror. A voice startled her. He seems to have fainted. Children are so fragile. They can't handle the slightest shock. The figure before her plunged Rosette into a fresh wave of fear. I saved you. Aren't you going to thank me? The black-haired, red-eyed youth, Chian, stood in the room again. He extended a hand towards her. Less a hand, more like the claw of a beast, dripping with the assassin's blood. Chian seemed to realize his appearance, and with a flick of his wrist, the claw transformed back into a human hand. There, all better now. Rosette trembled, her voice choked with tears. Why are you here? A faint smile touched Chian's lips. You were in danger. How could I not come and save you? I told you, whenever you remember me, I'll come to you. Rosette recoiled. What are you going to do? Chian stepped closer. I just wanted to save you. Aren't we friends? Watching him speak so casually after taking a life, Rosette's suspicion solidified. You're Saint Hung, aren't you? In this world, protected by the Guardian's heart, Saint Hungs were monstrous beings, the last vestiges of a curse, harbingers of disaster. Chian's smile widened, his features shifting. You finally recognized me. Now, you won't treat me like something that doesn't exist, will you? Humans like you call me the Saint Hung King. Everyone fears me. A long-haired man stood before her, extending a hand. But Rosette's eyes were filled with terror. She screamed and tried to flee, but the Saint Hung King caught her. Confusion clouded his face. Why are you so afraid? There's nothing to fear now. I've dealt with that intruder. Your family is safe. Are you hurt? Rosette struggled against him, begging the monstrous king to stay away. The man paused, surprised by her fear of him. He took a few steps back. Then I should keep my distance. Is that all right? Seeing the supposedly ferocious Saint Hung King acting so cautiously, Rosette's fear subsided slightly. If Chian was the Saint Hung King, then where was the true crown prince? This blonde, blue-eyed crown prince, privately, he has another face, because his true identity is a monster. The Saint Hung King. The little maid asks where the real crown prince is. Chian answers her plainly. He died years ago. I've lived in a human world for a long time. The crown prince was assassinated. I happened to be nearby. Before he died, he recognized that I wasn't human, so he made a wish to me that I take his place and live on. I agreed, because it was a pact made with his consent. Everyone sees me as him, except you. The little maid silently wondered, why only me? Come to think of it, it seemed like only she could hear the ghostly servants' voices. He then asked, why doesn't anyone know the crown prince's name? Chian continued to explain, we cannot use the names of the dead, even if they're gone. Using their names, it isn't a pleasant thing. So I cast a spell to make everyone forget his name. The little maid breathed a silent sigh of relief. At least Chian hadn't done anything terrible to the crown prince. He hesitated. Why did you say you wanted to be friends with me? Because she recognized his true form. He assumed Chian and was only worried about her revealing his secret and hastily assured him she wouldn't tell anyone. Chian gave a faint smile. Rosette, it's not because of that. On the contrary, I'm happy you recognized me. Perhaps because he had been lonely for millennia, Chian cherished this little girl who could see his true face. He leaned down towards the little maid's hair. Please continue to be my friend. Though his gesture was gentle, remembering his identity, the little maid couldn't help but shiver. Chian realized that his current form was indeed quite strange to the girl. A dark shadow flickered. The familiar young man reappeared before her. You should be used to this appearance, right? Seeing the little maid's still stunned expression, a flicker of disappointment crossed his eyes. Are you afraid of this too? Then how about this form? In the next second, he transformed into a butterfly. It was the same one the little maid had encountered in the castle before. Unfortunately, the girl, already afraid of monsters, was even more frightened now. Qian returned to his young man form, slumping dejectedly by the bed. I'll be whatever form you like. Will you please look at me? Hearing the plea in his voice, the little maid gathered her courage and looked at him. The easily pleased young man immediately broke into a happy smile. The little maid asked him again to confirm he wouldn't hurt her. Qian's gaze was firm. I never intended to put you in danger from the beginning. Didn't I just kill the person who wanted to hurt you? Sweet child, I like you very much and will always protect you. The usually haughty and arrogant older brother had become a dejected little lamb. It was because the Duke had borne the brunt of the sudden attack. He was the most seriously injured. Entangled with the assassins, the Duke had struggled greatly to break free. Guided by a frightened servant, he rushed to Kylie's room. He found Kylie's lying on the bed, his daughter's small form curled up beside him. Hearing her father's voice, the little maid finally looked up, her eyes brimming with tears. The Duke pulled his daughter into his arms. Enveloped in her father's comforting embrace, the little maid's fear and distress poured out in a torrent of tears. The next morning, the chaos finally subsided. The Duke held a simple funeral for the deceased knights and servants. Although they had lost their lives in this unexpected attack, it was a small mercy that most of the assassins were dead and 2 had been captured alive. The investigation revealed that the one who hired them was the Duke's sworn enemy, Marquis Alpel. In truth, the assassins had been fully prepared to resist the Duke's magic. However, they had ultimately underestimated his power. Abel, the eldest brother, and Camelon, the second oldest, had used their protective powers to block the attacks. Besides the deceased servants, the most seriously injured was Kylie's, the third brother. He couldn't remember much of last night, only that the little one had come to his room and thrown a vase at the assassin. When asked why she was in Kylie's room, the young maid, Rosette, froze. How could she explain Qian? She stammered, explaining that she had followed the sounds of someone collapsing to her brother's room. Seeing someone attacking Kylie's, she had instinctively grabbed a vase and thrown it. Then the assassin had started toward her. After that, she heard a splattering sound and saw pieces of red. Rosette frowned, racking her brain for an explanation of what happened next. The Duke came over and embraced her. What she had said was enough. He didn't want to force her to relive the night's events. The Duke then went over to Kylie's and gently stroked his head, a comforting gesture. Kylie's, unaccustomed to such paternal affection, was momentarily stunned. The Duke didn't linger. He immediately ordered his knights to assemble. He had a score to settle with Marquis Alpel. Abel stood. Father, I'll help you. Camelon added, I'll assist you as well. And so, father and sons departed together. Rosette and Kylie's were left alone in the room. How would these two, who were usually at odds, manage to coexist? The siblings, who typically bickered at every encounter, now sat together awkwardly, bound by the shared experience of facing danger. Rosette, who had bravely stepped forward to save her brother, sat on the sofa, relieved that no one had pressed her for details about the previous night. Otherwise, she truly didn't know how to explain Qian's presence. She hadn't had time to think it through yesterday. Did the Saint Hung King truly mean her no harm? If he had wanted to hurt her, he wouldn't have been so considerate of her feelings. That meant he really did want to be her friend. According to the original novel, the first villain to appear was Abel, then Camelon and Kylie's. And finally, the ultimate villain, Henry Ethel, who summoned the Saint Hung King and destroyed the world. But why was everything out of order now? The order of appearance, the plot, it was all jumbled. She felt like her brain couldn't keep up. Kylie's interrupted her thoughts. Hey, why did you do something so reckless last night? Rosette instinctively replied, because you were in danger. Kylie's voice was urgent. That's what I'm asking you. Why, knowing there was danger, did you throw the vase at him? Wouldn't you also be in danger? You don't even have a protector. How could you possibly fight him? It would have been better to call father. Rosette, thinking her brother was scolding her, dejectedly agreed that he was right. She hadn't been of any help. Kylie's became even more agitated. I have a protector. I wouldn't have been in any danger. Why did you save me? Rosette retorted. Because we're family, of course. This made Kylie's pause. Rosette's boldness, however, only lasted a second. She quickly deflated. Even though you might not acknowledge me, Kylie's immediately interrupted. Even though you're a bit annoying, I don't dislike you. It's just many people have used such tricks to deceive our family. That's why I'm cautious. Rosette was overjoyed. Brother, since you don't dislike me, that means you like me, right? Kylie's face flushed red. He had grown up in such a repressive environment that he had forgotten how to express his feelings. He lowered his head and mumbled, "Thank you," so softly that even Rosette, sitting beside him, barely heard it. Kylie's turned his head and repeated, more forcefully this time, "I said, thank you." All right. Seeing her brother's clumsy attempt at expressing gratitude, Rosette beamed. She couldn't help but wonder what Chi-Yin's reaction would be if she repeated Kylie's words to him. The terrifying Saint Hung King, feared by all, was at the beck and call of a little girl, simply because she was his only friend. She had promised to protect him always. With the crisis at the Duke's mansion over, Rosette began having nightmares every night. In her dreams, she relived the events of that night over and over again. Sometimes Kylie's died. Sometimes she was the one who perished. Other times, strangers would berate her. Her unusual state caught the Duke's attention. He summoned the royal physician to examine her. The physician declared that Rosette was physically healthy, but had suffered a significant shock that night. He recommended that her family help her stabilize her emotions. And so, the Duke began sleeping in Rosette's room every night. The young maid, Rosette, had asked her brother Kylie's if he wanted to come over, but Kylie's had flatly refused. Before bed, their father, the Duke, would sing Rosette a lullaby. Unfortunately, the tone-deaf, straightforward Duke would always sing off-key, leaving Rosette to sing herself to sleep. Her sleep was restless again tonight. Rosette dreamt once more of a long-haired man with a sorrowful face calling out to her. He urged her to stay by his side, whether in life or death. The girl startled awake, a lingering sense of the dream clinging to her, though the details remained elusive. A strange ache pulsed in her chest. She glanced at her father, the Duke, who had already drifted into a peaceful slumber. Quietly, she rose. Though it was night, the castle was brightly lit. It seemed her father had reinforced the magical wards again. Rosette stepped onto the balcony, gazing up at the star-dusted sky. She decided she needed to talk to Chi-Yin truthfully. If she could avoid it, she would never summon him. But reality couldn't be ignored forever. She would have to face him eventually. Tentatively, she called Chi-Yin's name. A dark shape shifted, and Chi-Yin materialized before her, an apple in his hand. His face lit up with a delighted smile. "It's been a while, my little friend," he said, offering her the apple. Rosette accepted the fruit, puzzled. Why would he bring her an apple? "Don't you like apples?" he asked. Rosette suddenly remembered their first encounter beneath an apple tree. Chi-Yin must have assumed she liked them. She had summoned him in the dead of night. What did she want to say? He was the Saint Hung King, a monstrous being of terrifying power, yet he seemed utterly devoted to this young girl. He had promised to protect her always. But Rosette didn't feel any joy at this special treatment. In fact, she felt a strange unease. Chi-Yin noticed her apprehension, his own expression falling. He had come so eagerly. Rosette's eyes widened in fear as she looked behind Chi-Yin, stumbling back. "What is that?" she whispered. Chi-Yin was wreathed in shadowy tendrils, a sight he seemed to regard with indifference. "It's the Saint Hung," he explained. "You call me the Saint Hung King. Isn't it because the Saint Hung is always with me?" The apple slipped from Rosette's grasp and thudded to the ground. Her father was the most powerful mage alive, yet Chi-Yin had effortlessly breached the wards he had spent days reinforcing. She knew what Chi-Yin was. She thought she was prepared, but just standing in his presence, she trembled with fear. If Chi-Yin truly meant her harm, he could have done it already. After a long pause, Rosette finally spoke. "You said you wanted to be my friend. Do you still mean that?" Chi-Yin's response was immediate. "Of course, Rosette." "Then make me a promise," Rosette continued. "Promise you won't harm anyone close to me. My family, for instance, and my ghost servants." She looked at him intently. "If you promise, I'll be your friend." A smile spread across Chi-Yin's face. "All right," he agreed instantly. "I'll do anything you ask." He gently took her hand. "So, Rosette, please don't be afraid of me anymore. Whenever you call, I'll come to you." "I'll be good," she whispered. "So please don't dislike me. And you don't have to be so nice to me. You can bully me. You can order me around." Looking at the earnest young man before her, Rosette felt a flicker of trust ignite within her. Perhaps she could trust him. Suddenly, a familiar voice called from inside. "Rosette." The balcony door swung open, and the Duke stood there, his expression shifting from concern to shock as he saw Chi-Yin. "Your Highness," he stammered. What are you doing here? His precious daughter, on a secret rendezvous with another man, caught red-handed by her father. This was a disaster. Rosette fumbled for an explanation, but Chi-In casually snapped his fingers. The Duke froze mid-sentence. Rosette whirled around to face Chi-In. What did you do? She demanded. Chi-In's eyes held a look of pure admiration for the Duke, as expected of someone under the highest magical protection. Even though I plunged everyone in foddery into a deep sleep, he was still able to wake himself. He hopped onto the railing. Turning to Rosette, he said, If your family ever makes you unhappy, you must tell me. I'll help you eat them all. Rosette immediately became anxious. No, you promised you wouldn't hurt anyone. Chi-In smiled mischievously. Yes, I did. That's why I said if you change your mind. Rosette declared righteously. I won't. So you have to keep your promise too. He looked at the girl, a hint of reluctance in his eyes. All right, Rosette. I'll see you next time. With that, he transformed into a wisp of blue smoke and vanished before her eyes. Rosette stared at the spot where he had disappeared. He's truly an enigma. Behind her, her father, the Duke, seemed to have completely forgotten what had just transpired. He looked at his daughter. Rosette, what are you doing out here by yourself? Rosette explained that she'd had a nightmare and wanted some fresh air. The Duke gently lifted her into his arms. If you have a nightmare, you can wake me up. I don't want to be blissfully asleep while my daughter is having nightmares. Looking at her concerned father, Rosette agreed to his request. Time flew by, and summer was soon drawing to a close. The Duke and his family moved into their residence in the royal capital, Wind's Gray Manor. Calling it a manor was an understatement. It was practically a castle, almost as grand as the royal palace itself. I hear His Majesty's birthday is approaching, so there will be celebrations for the next few days, Kylie's remarked casually. The Emperor's birthday is just an excuse. Are you really that clueless? Or are you just pretending? This left Rosette completely bewildered. Was there something she was supposed to know? Seeing her confused expression, her father and brothers exchanged shocked glances. A maid whispered in Rosette's ear, Miss, your birthday is also coming up soon. Rosette froze. She had completely forgotten about her birthday. After all, she had never celebrated one since coming to this world. A warmth spread through her chest, so they all remembered. The pampered daughter of the Duke, who didn't even remember her own birthday, simply because she had spent her early years elsewhere and had never had a birthday celebration. Rosette, accustomed to a quiet life, was then informed that her birthday and awakening ceremony would be held at the royal palace. It was all so sudden. Her brothers, however, seemed completely unfazed, as if the royal palace were their own home. Rosette reconsidered. Given the Emperor's attitude towards the Duke, their close relationship made sense. But if she went to the palace, she would definitely see Chi-In. The thought lingered in her mind. A hand rested on her head. The Duke, assuming she was apprehensive about the palace banquet, reassured her, You don't need to worry about anything. Just think about what gifts you'd like to receive. Her brothers all turned to look at their sister. Abel and Camelon enthusiastically encouraged her to voice her wishes. Only her tsundere older brother, Kylie's, lifted his chin. If you tell me, I'll consider getting it for you. Feeling their expectant gazes, Rosette stammered that it was all too sudden and she needed time to think. Camelon immediately suggested they go out for a stroll. Now that we're in the royal capital, there must be plenty of eye-catching new things to see. A little outing might help you find something you want. Rosette's eyes lit up. She looked at her father. Father, may we? The Duke readily agreed. It's a rare opportunity. We'll all go. He was interrupted by his aide. Your Grace, someone is contacting you via magical communication, and it's someone you must speak with personally. Duke Egidius of the three royal families. And so, the poor Duke could only watch as his sons took his daughter out for the day. The royal capital bustled with activity. Rosette, her eyes wide with wonder, ran ahead, excitedly pointing out all the new and interesting sights to her brothers. Seeing his sister so happy, Abel almost regretted not taking her out sooner. The three brothers were completely devoted to their sister, and in less than half a day, the gifts they had bought for her had piled up into a small mountain. The frantic shopping spree finally concluded. The four siblings, having regained their composure, walked together down the street. Their second eldest brother, Camelon, mentioned some of his academy classmates who would also be attending Rosette's birthday banquet. He expressed his intention to introduce them to his sister. This reminded Abel, the eldest brother, of something a servant had mentioned earlier about Duke Ajur-Duller. It seemed the Duke had a son around Rosette's age. The name, Young Master Ajur-Duller, sounded strangely familiar to the young maid. Right? He was the male lead in the novel. These were the three most prominent families in the empire. The female lead of the novel was a maid from the Benko family. The male lead was the young master of the Ajur Duller family. And the Windsgray family were the antagonists who stood in their way. As a transmigrator already familiar with the plot, Windsgray Rosette heard the name of the Ajur Duller family's young master from her eldest brother for the first time. Although the current storyline had deviated significantly from the novel, protagonists always had their plot armor. Rosette felt it necessary to establish a good relationship with a male lead in advance. So, she eagerly inquired about what kind of person young Master Ajur Duller was. Her eldest brother seemed puzzled by her sudden interest. Rosette smiled sweetly and explained that since she and young Master Ajur Duller were around the same age, she wanted to befriend him. A hint of jealousy flickered across Abel's face. But you have your brothers to keep you company. Why do you need to make other friends? Kylie's, the third brother, chimed in, yeah, are friends really that important? Camelon continued the relay. Anything you do with friends, your brothers can do with you too. Rosette looked at her brothers, brimming with possessiveness. Were they trying to prevent anyone from diverting her attention away from them? Soon, the brothers led Rosette to a secluded corner. Abel cleared his throat dramatically. Rosette watched closely. He walked over to a large boulder. Here's a boulder. As you can see, it's very hard, right? With that, he clenched his fist and began to channel his power. In the next instant, his fist slammed into the boulder, shattering it into pieces. Yes, this is the divine protection I received. Strength dozens of times greater than an ordinary person, and a body impervious to metal and poison. He stood with his hands on his hips amidst the shattered rock, a proud expression on his face. Rosette, of course, applauded enthusiastically for her divinely empowered eldest brother. Watching Abel bask in his sister's praise, Camelon refused to let him hog the spotlight. He turned to Rosette. I'll show you my ability too, Rosette. With that, he turned and gestured to a passerby. The passerby approached, and Camelon greeted him with a warm smile. In the next second, he opened his eyes, which seemed like bottomless whirlpools, drawing one in. The passerby looked into his eyes, his gaze becoming vacant. Camelon instructed him to perform various actions, and the passerby obeyed without resistance, diligently following Camelon's commands. Yes, Camelon, your divine protection is the ability to control someone's actions with just a glance. Two brothers had showcased their abilities. What about the third brothers? What's it like to have three doting older brothers? Apparently, it means that when the sister merely mentions wanting to make a friend, the usually reserved brothers begin taking turns showcasing their abilities just to prove to her that they can do anything a friend can do with her. Rosette expressed her astonishment at Camelon's ability to control another person's behavior. Camelon boasted that he could make the passerby do other things if she wanted to see. Rosette politely declined. Her kind heart couldn't accept the idea of someone being manipulated for her amusement. She remembered how, in the original story, Camelon had used his divine protection years later to separate the male and female leads and even dismantle the entire royal family. Fortunately, he had to make eye contact to use this ability, so it wouldn't cause too much harm easily. As Camelon released his control, the passerby came to his senses, utterly bewildered by his situation. Rosette asked why Camelon hadn't controlled Abel or his servant instead of a random stranger. Camelon explained with a smile. The principle of this ability is to not use it on companions. Maintaining trust between us is important. Of course, even if I were to use it on a companion, I couldn't let anyone else see. He then pointed to Kylie's. All right, it's your turn now. Kylie's, however, refused outright. There are countless types of divine protection. Occasionally, the protected individual can't control their protection, like Kylie's. The tower is a place with a guardian's heart, and the protected person can harmonize. After leaving the tower, Kylie's actually learned to control his protection. Does he still not want to show it? Abel inquired. Is he worried Rosette will be afraid of his protection? Kylie's hastily denied it. The young maid quickly intervened. Little squirt, it's okay if your brother doesn't want to. This only further irritated Kylie's, who had long resented the nickname Little Squirt. Abel and Camelon also started teasing Kylie's. They always enjoyed giving him pet names related to Rosette. The maid, however, began to think seriously. How about Shy Shy? She suggested. Shy Shy brother. The two older brothers burst out laughing. Even Kylie's, usually quick to anger, found himself amused. As they were joking around, a night came to remind them that the sun was about to set. Abel suggested they visit the toy store in the alley one more time. What kind of encounter would they have there? These are the three most prominent and most competitive families in the Empire. Yet, the three heads of these families were the best of friends. To promptly reply to the magical communication from Duke Ajur Duller, a notorious daughter-doting father, Henriette had to painfully sacrifice his shopping time with his daughter. He listened as Ajur Duller continued to lament about how much he regretted missing the Emperor's birthday banquet. Henriette finally interrupted. "Did you use communication magic just to tell me this nonsense?" Ajur Duller accused him of being cold and heartless. Listening to his friend's rambling, Henriette recalled the events of 7 years ago. Back then, when he was searching for a safe place for his daughter, he had considered the other two families. But Duke Ajur Duller was away at war, not on his lands. And Duke Besko was away from the capital due to family matters. So he had no choice but to entrust his daughter to the care of his subordinate, Count Samand. Thinking back on it now, he felt regret. Ajur Duller pulled him from his thoughts. "By the way, I heard you found your lost daughter. Congratulations." He rubbed his hands together expectantly. "I just so happen to have a 6-year-old son. Your daughter should be about the same age as my son. Why don't we?" He was cut off by Henriette. "If there's nothing important, I'll hang up now." And he immediately ended the call. "It seems Ajur and I will never get along." Suddenly, someone banged frantically on the door. Hugh rushed in, panicked. "Your Grace, it's terrible. The young miss is gone." Rewinding an hour, the young maid and her brothers had gone to the toy store in the alley before sunset to pick out gifts. Her brothers attentively selected presents for her, even arguing over the color of a doll. After a day of shopping, Rosette was noticeably tired. A maid suggested they rest in the store's lounge. Seeing that her brothers were unlikely to agree on anything soon, Rosette readily accepted the suggestion. The other maid said she would inform the young masters and bring some refreshments to the lounge. The two maids walked towards the lounge, discussing the brothers' childish behavior. While they were unguarded, a figure crept up behind them. Rosette felt a shadow fall over her. In the next instant, a cloth soaked in a soporific was pressed against her face. The Duke, a villain who never flinched, even in the face of disaster, was now enraged. His most beloved daughter had been kidnapped in broad daylight. His sons recounted the events to their father. Upon hearing that his daughter had been dragged away by a group of people, the Duke clenched his fists. Camelon hung his head, blaming himself for not protecting his sister. Henriette didn't scold him. He simply said apologies could wait until after the matter was resolved. He immediately ordered Hugh to assemble the entire guard. He would personally lead the rescue mission. Seeing the Duke, a volcano on the verge of eruption, Hugh knew whoever was responsible, they were in for a world of hurt. Rosette groggily opened her eyes. Her surroundings were dim. She seemed to be in an abandoned warehouse. Not far away, several men were still discussing how to deal with her. Rosette lifted her eyes and saw Mary, also bound. Mary remained unconscious. Rosette shifted, realizing she was tied up. The movement alerted her captors. The leader, clearly the head of the group, stepped forward. Rosette watched helplessly as the kidnappers approached. From their earlier conversation, it seemed they didn't know who she was. She wondered if they would release her if they knew her true identity. The kidnappers, looking at the silent girl, threatened her not to cry. Unexpectedly, Rosette spoke. "If you let me go, I promise I won't tell anyone what happened today." The kidnappers found her childishly naive. "If we were just going to let you go, why would we have bothered kidnapping you?" Rosette put on a brave face. "Because I'm a maid in the Wind's Gray household." The air hung heavy for a moment. Then, the kidnappers burst into laughter as if they had heard the funniest joke imaginable. Their laughter caught Rosette off guard. One of the kidnappers sneered. "Everyone knows Duke Wind's Gray has only 3 sons. We've never heard of a daughter." Panic welled up inside Rosette. It seemed that beyond the highest echelons of the nobility, no one knew of her existence as a maid in the ducal household. The leader stopped laughing and threatened her fiercely. "Stay put and don't try anything clever." He ordered the others to leave the warehouse with him, instructing someone to investigate the girl's identity. After all, if she truly was connected to the upper nobility, they would be in serious trouble. They would have to silence her permanently. Rosette realized with a sinking feeling that revealing her supposed connection had made her situation even more dangerous. How would she handle this? Despite being unexpectedly kidnapped, the young girl showed no sign of fear on her face. She still had a trump card. Seeing that the kidnappers didn't believe her claim of being a maid and were now considering silencing her because of her potential noble connections, Rosette knew she had to play her last card. She knelt on the floor, took a deep breath, and softly spoke a single word. Chien. Her shadow on the ground began to shift. Suddenly, a small head emerged from the shadow. It gradually transformed into the form of Chien. His voice was filled with delight. "Rosette, you finally summoned me." Rosette immediately asked if he could help her. A dark shadow flashed. Chien materialized fully before her. "Of course, my little friend. I'm happy to help." Meanwhile, the streets outside were in an uproar. Commoners watched as a large number of guards suddenly gathered, speculating amongst themselves about what had happened. The bound suspects looked terrified, frantically denying any involvement. Camelon looked at the suspects, his eyes swirling like a vortex. "Is that so? I'll judge the truth for myself." The suspects' eyes glazed over instantly. The kidnappers, having caught wind of the commotion, sensed something was wrong and raced back to the warehouse, only to find it empty. Rosette found herself in a courtyard. Chien informed her that they were in the back gardens of the royal palace. After relocating them, he immediately asked if she was injured. Rosette quickly assured him she was fine, grateful for his timely arrival. Chien looked puzzled. Wouldn't it have been simpler to just kill them all? Rosette spoke earnestly. "I don't want you to kill anyone." In truth, her kind heart couldn't bear the thought of anyone dying because of her. She then asked Chien to bring Mary, the maid, to her as well. At her earlier request, Chien had prioritized Mary's safety during the escape. Chien extended his hand, black shadows swirling around him, but Mary didn't appear. "Oh dear, I seem to have accidentally swallowed her whole." Rosette's eyes filled with tears. "Don't joke like that. You wouldn't." Chien quickly reached out to wipe away her tears. "Oh, Rosette, I'm sorry. It seems I took that joke too far. I was just teasing. I thought it might be difficult for you to explain if she saw me while you were dressed like this. So I decided to let her sleep a little longer." Rosette finally relaxed, though her face was still pale. Chien took her hand. "I'm sorry. As an apology, I'll take you somewhere nice." Where would he take her? The rumored cruel and bloodthirsty king of Stigma was, in fact, remarkably clueless. He defended the girl he liked with a careless joke. How could he possibly make amends? Chien extended a hand to the young maid, a gesture of apology. "I'll take you somewhere nice." Before the maid could react, a flash of brilliant light forced her eyes closed. The next instant, she found herself in a breathtaking courtyard. Violets bloomed in profusion, their petals drifting down on the gentle breeze, carrying their sweet fragrance. The maid gazed around in wonder. A small bridge arched over a stream, reflecting the surrounding pines and cypresses. Exotic flowers and verdant bamboo adorned the courtyard, creating a scene of exquisite beauty. Puzzled, she asked where they were. Chien smiled, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "This is my secret garden." The maid looked around again. This place was certainly different from the royal palace gardens she'd just left. It reminded her of the glass conservatory at her family home, though even more magnificent. Chien watched her quietly as she pondered. Suddenly, he reached out and plucked a violet petal that had landed in her hair. The maid gasped as the petal, where his fingers had brushed it, instantly withered. She stared as it crumbled to ash, her curiosity evident. Chien, unable to resist, leaned closer and gently kissed her forehead. The maid, completely taken aback, stared at him, speechless. A moment later, she recoiled, rubbing her forehead and complaining that his lips were icy cold. The unexpected focus of her complaint surprised even Chien. They spent hours exploring the secret garden, but even then, they hadn't seen it all. As darkness fell, the maid, worried about her family's concern, expressed her desire to return home. Chien, accustomed to solitude, was reluctant. This was his first friend, and he wanted to share everything he treasured with her. He continued to show her around with boyish enthusiasm, leaving the maid torn. She knew everyone would be frantic with worry, but Chien had saved her life, and she didn't want to hurt his feelings. Meanwhile, back at the Duke's mansion, the atmosphere was heavy with anxiety. The captured kidnappers claimed that Rosette was already gone when they entered the warehouse. Abel, convinced they were lying, flew into a rage and raised his hand to strike one of them. His father, Duke Henriette, arrived just in time to stop him. He reprimanded Abel for his impulsiveness, nearly killing the kidnappers before they could be properly questioned. Realizing his rashness, Abel released the man. The Duke then instructed his aide to summon Camelon, whose abilities could influence minds and compel truth. Perhaps he could uncover Rosette's whereabouts. While her brother was nearly driven to violence by her disappearance, Rosette was enjoying the company of her newfound companion in the secret garden. It wasn't that she was being thoughtless or selfish. She was in the company of the Stigma King, her rescuer, and felt obligated to remain. Back at the mansion, Camelon used his magic to try and coerce the truth from the kidnappers. But despite his efforts, their story remained consistent. They truly didn't know where Rosette was. The aide asked the Duke how he wished to proceed with the now useless kidnappers. A flash of cold fury crossed the Duke's face. Execute them all. He stopped mid-sentence, recalling Rosette's reaction to the handling of Count Simon. Knowing his daughter's kind heart, he knew she wouldn't want anyone to die because of her. He amended his order, instructing his aide to investigate the kidnappers' past crimes and sentence them according to imperial law. As he was giving further instructions about the search, Kylie's appeared. He offered to use his aegis to locate Rosette. Both of his brothers were stunned by the suggestion. The Duke's expression was grave as he considered the feasibility of the proposal. If you're certain you can control the aegis, he said, then try. But if you're not sure, it's all right. The situation is not yet so dire that you need to push yourself. His father's words resonated with Kylie's own anxieties. But then he remembered something Rosette had said. Because we are family. His resolve hardened. I can do it. Night had fallen. In the courtyard of the Duke's mansion, only the chirping of crickets broke the silence. A brilliant white light enveloped Kylie's as he stood in the open space. Lips pressed together, Kylie's focused his power within the radiant glow. The ceiling runes on his horn shattered, and 2 ivory points emerged from his head. Meanwhile, Rosette strolled through the garden with Chi, and looking around, she noticed something she hadn't seen in the daylight. Now that darkness had fallen, everything in the garden seemed to shimmer with an ethereal light. It's magical, she breathed. The two walked together through the mountainous wilderness. Lush, verdant forest stretched as far as the eye could see. Mary, the young maid, sighed. This garden was simply enormous. Sheehan explained that the space was constructed with magic. He'd spent so much time here, utterly bored, that he'd started decorating it little by little to pass the time. Eventually, it had become what it was now. Hearing this, Mary finally laughed. The king of Stigma, decorating a massive garden to pass the time. What a wholesome hobby. She looked at Chi and, thank you for bringing me here to see all this beauty. And I didn't have a chance to say it earlier, but thank you for saving me. But we've explored quite a bit. Shouldn't we head back now? My family will be very worried about me. Would Cheatham be willing to let Mary leave? Could you believe that this young man, his hair adorned with flowers, was the rumored cruel and bloodthirsty king of Stigma? Why was the king of Stigma dressed like this? The story rewinds a quarter of an hour. Persuaded by Mary, Chian brought her to the back gardens of the royal palace. He told her that the people searching for her were on their way. So let's play here while we wait. Otherwise, we might miss them. Mary, looking at Anne's expectant face, agreed to his request. So the two of them wandered through the royal palace gardens together. As Mary was intently admiring a flower in her hand, Chian gently tucked another flower into her hair. Don't play with it, he said. He seemed very pleased. There, now you're beautiful. Not to be outdone, Mary tucked a flower into Chian's hair. You too. It had to be said, with the flower tucked behind his ear. Chian's face looked even more handsome. Mary even felt a pang of regret. If only Chian had long hair like her, she could have styled it even more beautifully. Chian was silent for a moment. Then, with a flourish, he conjured a head full of long hair. If you like long hair, then I'll be like this. And so, the two knelt amongst the flowers, Chian allowing Mary to adorn his long hair. In no time, a handsome young man with a head full of flowers emerged. Chian nervously asked Mary how he looked. Mary, extremely satisfied with her handiwork, declared it perfect. Chian generously offered that if Mary liked this look, he could keep it. Mary pondered silently. Come to think of it, Stigma usually took on rather frightening forms. She couldn't help but ask, Chian, whether I like it or not isn't important. What do you really look like? Chian explained that when Duke Henriette had embraced him earlier, his form had been very close to a part of his true self. However, Mary had been crying at the time, so her vision had been blurred. She only remembered that he had long hair. Chian took Mary's hand. I can take any form, but here, in front of you, I want to maintain a pleasing appearance. I also have a terrifying, ugly true form. If you insist on seeing it, I can change. Mary quickly refused. Since Chi-in had put it that way, she didn't want to force him. But he had mentioned other forms. Just how many true forms did Chi-in possess? Seeing Mary's curiosity, Chi-in offered to transform into other appearances. What would he become? Faced with a kind and loving father figure, Mary felt a surge of inexplicable fear, simply because this father before her was the king of stigma in disguise. Seeing that Mary didn't like his current form, Chi-in quickly shifted into the likeness of her older brother, Abel. How about this? One familiar face after another appeared before Mary. She had known that Chi-in could change his appearance, but she hadn't realized he could also mimic their voices. Mary felt a strange and unsettling fear. Chi-in shifted back into the form of Duke Henriette. You don't like it? Mary blurted out that it was all too creepy. A flicker of disappointment crossed Chi-in's eyes. If only I had been your guardian from the beginning. Mary seemed to sense something. She reminded him, you promised you wouldn't harm my family. Chi-in transformed back into his own appearance, remarking on how quick she was. But although he longed to be her guardian, he would certainly keep his promise. Then, he asked which form Mary liked best. Without thinking, she blurted out, they're all terrifying. The moment the words left her mouth, she realized her mistake. As expected, Chi-in instantly transformed into a picture of dejection. So all my forms are terrifying? Before the young maid, Mary, could explain, Chi-in flopped onto the ground, transforming into a pathetic, pleading little sphere. I don't want you to always think I'm scary, he squeaked. So I'll just become like this, okay? Mary watched the little sphere roll slowly on the ground. It certainly wasn't scary. In fact, it was so soft and squishy, it seemed rather cute. She reached out and poked the little sphere. Rosette likes small things like this, doesn't she? So, in this form, Mary felt something furry brush against her finger the next moment. Chi-in had transformed into a small, black fox. Mary's eyes lit up. This is so cute. She scooped up the little fox. Can you stay like this all the time? Chi-in immediately agreed. Of course I can. Although transforming into a four-legged animal is a bit uncomfortable, as long as you like it, I'll stay like this. But you have to meet with me often, okay? Suddenly, a wolf-like howl echoed through the air, sending a shiver down Mary's spine. She assumed it was Chi-in and mused, how could such a cute little fox make such a rough sound? But Chi-in insisted it wasn't him. Where did that monstrous sound come from? A cute little fox with a deep, rumbling howl? Of course, it wasn't possible, because the sound wasn't coming from Chi-in at all. Mary looked fearfully into the nearby shadows. A strange, enormous beast appeared on the rooftop, and the beast was steadily advancing in her direction. Mary, thinking it was a stigma, froze in terror. Chi-in's voice soothed her. Calm down, Rosette. That's not a stigma. Are those people here to pick you up? He jumped from Mary's arms and transformed back into a small sphere, melting into the grass. Before disappearing completely, he told her he would leave the other maid, Rosette, in a suitable place. Alone and helpless, Mary watched as the beast led a group of people towards her. There seemed to be someone sitting on the beast's head. Looking closer, she realized it was her second oldest brother, Camelon. A figure rushed from the crowd. Duke Henriette, her father, practically flew towards her. He scooped her up, checking her over for injuries, then held her tightly, as if she were a precious treasure he'd lost and found again. Where have you been? Mary felt her father's arms trembling around her. She realized how worried he had been. Guilt washed over her as she apologized. No one had ever cared for her so deeply before. So even though she knew her father would worry, she hadn't truly understood the depth of his concern. Only now did she truly understand her place in his heart. Lost in her thoughts, she jumped as the enormous beast lumbered closer and sniffed at her. Papa, what is that? The beast plopped down on the ground, its head covered in black fur. Little Bean, you don't recognize me? Hearing the familiar nickname, Mary realized it was her third oldest brother, Kylie's. Just then, Abel and Camelon rushed over, followed by the Windsgray Knights and the Royal Knights. So many people had been mobilized, all to find her. Her father, still holding her, said, "Let's go back to the mansion first." In the grand living room of the Duke's mansion, Mary and Kylie's sat side by side on the sofa. She looked at Kylie's, who had returned to his human form, her eyes full of curiosity. Kylie's, feeling her gaze, mumbled, "What are you staring at? Why had he transformed into a stigma? Hurt, sunder a brother's magic." was the ability to transform into a giant beast, all because of his protective instincts. He was a sage who had broken through the arena. It was said that the great sage had studied stigma in his lifetime, so the magical protection Kylie's received was stigmatization. However, the side effect of stigmatization was loss of reason. That's why Kylie's had to go to the tower to learn how to control his protection. He had only recently returned. Because of this, Kylie's hated using his stigmatization. Yet, he had made an exception for her. Mary was still touched by his actions when her other two brothers rushed over, anxiously asking if she was hurt. Mary quickly waved her hands. As soon as she returned to the mansion, she had a full medical examination. The doctor said she was perfectly fine. Her brothers finally relaxed. Just then, their father, the Duke, entered the room with a grim expression. The living room fell silent. Mary glanced surreptitiously at her father, noticing his gaze upon her. Duke Henriette finally broke the silence. "Just now at the royal palace," he began, "I found your maid collapsed on the ground." Hoping to ease Mary's mind, he continued, "What exactly happened today?" Mary racked her brain, trying to concoct a plausible explanation that omitted any mention of Chien. She stammered, explaining that after her maid led her away, she couldn't recall anything else. The Duke didn't press further, his expression softening. "It's all right as long as you're safe. I was already planning," he declared, "to destroy the entire capital if I couldn't find you. This incident highlights a failure in your protection. For the remainder of our stay in the capital, you must be accompanied by me whenever you go out. Even if you're just playing in the courtyard, you must have at least 2 guards and 2 maids with you." He then turned his gaze to his 3 sons. "And as for you 3, although you are capable of protecting yourselves, Rosette is still a child who needs protection. You should have been watching over her. How could you be so careless?" The 3 brothers, Abel, Camelon, and Kylie's, were consumed with guilt, bracing themselves for their father's reprimand. The Duke continued, "You are also confined. During our time in the capital, you are not to leave without my permission." The 3 brothers exchanged glances. They had expected a harsh punishment, but instead, their father had simply issued a mild warning. Despite the kidnapping, the atmosphere felt like that of any ordinary family, filling Mary with warmth and happiness. She was about to experience an unforgettable day. What exactly happened that day? Could you imagine that this mountain of gifts was just the tip of the iceberg of what the girl received? Mary awoke to a startling sight. After her maid explained, she learned that these were all birthday gifts from the nobles of the capital. Her brothers rushed in, vying to give their sister presents. But this wasn't the main event of the day. Mary was about to attend her very first banquet. Nobles from across the capital, dressed in their finest attire, gathered in the banquet hall. They whispered amongst themselves, curious about what the famed Lady Winslet, daughter of the Duke, was like. Meanwhile, the star of the banquet was filled with anxiety. What was she supposed to do in the banquet hall? Her father, the Duke, sensing her worry, reassured her. "Rosette," he said gently, "whether you're in the banquet hall or anywhere else, you can do whatever you want. Today is your special day. A Winslet can always do as she pleases." With that, the doors of the banquet hall slowly opened, and the Duke entered, followed by his 3 dashing sons. Kylie's, as always, wore his usual aloof expression. The nobles murmured amongst themselves, "The 3 young masters are here as well. Is it the rumored Lady Winslet?" Mary, dressed in a small white dress, appeared before the crowd. Her large eyes sparkled like a fawn's. The understated yet luxurious ornaments in her hair perfectly accentuated her noble air. There was no trace of the girl who had once lived on the streets. As the family entered, numerous nobles approached the Duke, eager to engage in conversation. Overwhelmed by the throng of people, Mary felt a sense of unease and fear. The Duke's expression hardened as he drew his daughter close. "All of you stay back," he commanded. "My daughter is uncomfortable." His blatant display of favoritism, completely disregarding the other's feelings, further solidified Mary's importance in the Duke's eyes. The nobles, taking the cue, showered Mary with compliments, comparing her beauty to that of a sprite. The deluge of praise made her skin crawl, but she responded with a polite smile. The straightforward Duke didn't demur. "Isn't that obvious?" he retorted. "Anyone with eyes can see that." Seeing that flattery worked on the Duke, the nobles became even more effusive in their praise. Suddenly, a figure stepped in front of Mary. "Thank you for your kind words," Abel interjected. "My sister is still young, and this is her first time in such a setting. We'd like her to feel more at ease. Please, go and chat with your friends." Just then, Camelon excitedly beckoned to his sister. What was he up to? Attending her first birthday banquet, Mary was nearly overwhelmed by the constant stream of compliments from the nobles. Thankfully, her eldest brother had come to her rescue. The next moment, her second oldest brother, Camelon, waved her over excitedly. It turned out he wanted to introduce his classmates to his sister. Right, Mary thought. As if anyone didn't know, he just wanted to show her off. Mary watched as two male classmates, their eyes vacant, ceaselessly praised her cuteness. It was then that the young lady realized her second oldest brother, Camelon, had cast a truth-telling spell on them in public. Kylie's, her third oldest brother, watched the scene unfold with a haughty air, remarking internally how foolish everyone was. He then proceeded to recount verbatim every single flattering remark made about Mary. One could only marvel at his impressive memory. The banquet hall buzzed with music and dancing. While everyone was lost in the rhythm of the dance, the grand doors swung open with a resounding creak. The emperor and the crown prince entered. Qian, dressed in formal attire and his long braid neatly arranged, appeared alongside the emperor, his expression serious. He surveyed the room. His eyes immediately fell upon Mary amidst the crowd. His expression softened instantly, a genuine smile gracing his lips. Mary, observing this sudden transformation, wondered, is he smiling at me because he's happy? He really wears his heart on his sleeve. The emperor stood before the assembled guests and cleared his throat. "I wish to express my sincere gratitude to all of you who have gathered here again this evening. This occasion is a celebration I've arranged for someone who has always been by my side, protecting me, namely, Duke Henriette and his daughter. So let us offer our heartfelt congratulations to Lady Mary on her 7th birthday." The hall erupted in enthusiastic applause. Smiling faces turned towards Mary, offering birthday wishes. Flushed with a mixture of shyness and gratitude, Mary, experiencing such widespread attention for the first time, felt her heart flutter long after the initial wave of greetings. Being showered with so many blessings was even more heartwarming than she could have imagined. She hoped every day could be this joyful. "I wonder if they've arrived," she mused, referring to the protagonists of the story she knew. "To ensure smooth sailing in the future, I really need to get on their good side." Mary silently encouraged herself. Would she meet the people she longed to meet today? Aside from the age-old question of whether one prefers mom or dad, the most difficult question in the world was probably being asked by all 3 older brothers simultaneously, which one you love the most. Mary scanned the banquet hall, searching for the familiar faces of the protagonists, only to be caught in the act by her brothers. Camelon inquired what she was looking for. With an awkward laugh, Mary explained she was just hoping to make some friends. Her brothers' expressions immediately darkened. Mary suddenly remembered they weren't particularly fond of her socializing. Tried to appear nonchalant, she brightly declared she'd love to spend time with them, but they were always so busy and she didn't want to be a bother. Camelon scooped her up in his arms. "Nonsense, we're not busy at all. You can play with us." He set her back down, then posed a soul-crushing question. "Out of the 3 of us, who do you like best?" Abel, the eldest, protested that Camelon's question was far too difficult. Camelon, unabashed, replied that he was simply curious, and if Abel wasn't, he could be excluded. Abel quickly backpedaled. No, I'm quite curious as well." Kylie's feigned indifference. "Well, go on, answer them." It was a no-win situation. Any answer would be wrong. Mary forced a smile, desperately trying to think of a way out. Her 3 brothers stared expectantly. Just then, a figure appeared. "There you are." It was Duke Henriette, her father. Mary felt a wave of relief wash over her. The Duke inquired what they were discussing. Mary dutifully recounted her brother's question. The Duke chuckled confidently. "What a childish question. Isn't the answer obvious?" "This is the most harmonious answer." Mary chimed in. "That's right. I love Papa the most." Her father looked at her tenderly. He extended his hand. "Well then, would you care to dance with your favorite Papa?" Mary, momentarily stunned, then gently placed her hand in his. "Yes." The banquet concluded. Exhausted, Mary collapsed on her bed. Despite the fatigue, she felt happy. For so long, her birthday had been just another day. She hadn't expected to receive so much affection and well wishes. Lost in the memories of the evening, a sudden tapping at her window startled her. Who could it be? Just moments ago, he had been the serious and courteous crown prince at the royal banquet. The next moment, he vaulted over the wall and appeared on the windowsill of Mary's room. After all, she was his most precious friend. Chian politely greeted the young maid with a good evening. The maid, surprised by Chian's sudden appearance, asked him what he was doing there. Chian, leaning on the windowsill, explained, "We didn't get a chance to talk properly at the banquet, so I thought I'd come and chat with you. It's your birthday today, and I have a present for you. Could you close your eyes for a moment?" Though puzzled, Mary had decided to be Chian's friend, and that meant trusting him. Obediently, she closed her eyes. "You can open them now." Mary opened her eyes to a sight she recognized instantly. It was Chian's secret garden, the place he had brought her before. Bathed in moonlight, everything shimmered, creating a breathtakingly romantic scene. He extended a hand towards her. "Rosette," he said, "would you grant me this dance?" Mary looked at Chian. His eyes sparkled with sincerity and anticipation. She placed her hand gently in his. Chian pulled her close with a gentle tug. The sudden movement startled her for a moment, but soon, guided by Chian, she lost herself in the joy of the dance. As the music ended, Mary sighed. "I had no idea you were such a wonderful dancer," she said. "So, is this dance my present?" Chian immediately refuted the idea. "Of course not." He leaned in and gently kissed her forehead. Before Mary could react, a dark mist began to emanate from where Chian had kissed her. The shape of the mist suggested something was passing through her forehead, entering her body. Finally, the mist dissipated, leaving behind a faint shimmer. Mary touched her forehead. "What did you just do?" Chian smiled. "I noticed how much you liked this garden, so I wanted to give it to you. From now on, whenever you wish to come here, all you have to do is think about it." Mary looked around the beautiful garden. "The time here, the sunlight, the moonlight, the starlight. Everything here is yours now." Chian took her hand, and in an instant, they were back in her room. Chian asked expectantly, "Do you like your gift?" Mary felt the gift was too extravagant. Could she really accept it? Chian's smile widened. "Of course. You can use the garden however you like. Happy birthday, Rosette. I'll see you again soon." While others gave her dolls, jewelry, and other typical gifts for a young girl, he had given her an entire garden, simply because she was his most precious friend. After such a memorable day, Mary lay in bed, unable to sleep. It was strangely upsetting that her birthday was over. The festivities in the capital had ended. After the recent kidnapping attempt, Duke Henriette had reinforced the city's security. He planned to visit the tower before returning to his own territory to see Rosette. He had heard of it before, but didn't know exactly what it was. His father explained that the tower was a window through which the guardian stars communicated with humans. There were several towers within the empire, and the Star Tower was one of them, located south of the Duke's territory. After a half-day carriage ride, the Duke's family arrived at the Star Tower. The tower's guardians were already waiting at the entrance to greet them. Duke Henriette arranged for Kylie's to undergo an examination to check for any side effect from his recent use of the Aegis. Kylie's insisted he was fine and didn't need an examination. However, his father was firm. The power of the Aegis is not something humans can wield easily. Furthermore, your control over it was unstable before. It's best to be safe and have it checked. The Guardians added that they were prepared for the examination. Kylie's didn't argue further, but it was clear he was reluctant. It was probably similar to how most people felt about having a medical checkup. The others prepared to go to the prayer hall, the place where they could communicate with their respective guardian stars. Mary hadn't received the Aegis yet and didn't have a guardian star, so she didn't need to go to the prayer hall. She asked her father's permission to explore the tower. For her safety, the Duke assigned a large group of attendants to accompany her. Following the young maid's gaze, Mary was quickly drawn to a statue. It was the Sun Monarch, master of the Star Tower, and the very same guardian heart that would bestow protection upon the male protagonist of the original story. Turning, Mary instructed a servant to bring the bouquet of flowers that had been delivered on her birthday. She placed the bouquet before the Sun Monarch. Clasping her hands together, she began to pray devoutly. This was a world without gods, and the guardian heart was a relic of the past. Though the customs of the former prophets and their faith had vanished entirely, Mary still wanted to make a wish. "Please protect my family and keep them safe and happy," she whispered. Her prayer finished. She was about to leave with the servant when, suddenly, a figure came rushing up behind her. Just who was this figure? Could you imagine that this soft, adorable little boy would one day become the formidable god of war who would shake the very foundations of the empire? Mary was knocked to the ground by the sudden impact. It wasn't until she heard another man's call that she realized he was Lucian, the protagonist of the story. Lucian scrambled to his feet, just as a throng of people approached from behind him, guarding the man who had just spoken. Mary immediately recognized him as Duke Ajur-Duller. He patted Lucian's back and told him to apologize to Mary. Lucian obediently bowed to her. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "I was too excited and wasn't watching where I was going." He then extended his hand to Mary, his eyes full of genuine apology. "Let me help you up." Mary gently took his hand. "It's all right, thank you." Perhaps because she was so used to being around her father and brothers, seeing the protagonist now felt somewhat strange. "What happened here?" a voice boomed. Mary's father, Duke Henriette, entered with her brothers. Upon seeing Henriette, Duke Ajur-Duller became excessively enthusiastic. Well, if it isn't my old friend, Henriette." Henriette, however, showed no sign of being pleased to see an old friend. Instead, his face held a look of distinct displeasure. This surprised Mary. It was the first time she had ever seen her father wear such an expression. Henriette clearly wanted nothing to do with Ajur-Duller. He turned abruptly. "Rosette, we're finished here. Let's go home." Ajur-Duller, however, was not about to let him go. He followed closely behind. "Yes, that's the cold, heartless expression I've heard so much about. It seems I've finally met the real Henriette. We haven't seen each other in 10 years, Henriette. We must catch up." He glanced over at someone else, then enthusiastically grasped Abel's hand. "Abel, it's been so long. My, how you've grown." The barrage of unwanted greetings made Mary's head spin. She covered her ears, trying to block out the cacophony. Meanwhile, Lucian quietly approached Rosette, seeing that she had noticed him. He quickly introduced himself. "My name is Lucian. I'm 6 years old." Rosette responded in kind. "My name is Rosette. My full name is Rosette Clarice Winslet. I'm 7. Lucian excitedly took her hand. "Then I should call you Big Sister." When any sparks fly between them? What would happen when one brother complex saw another boy enthusiastically holding his little sister's hand? The answer, of course, was to immediately slap the boy's hand away. Kylie stepped between his sister and Lucian, his tone unfriendly. "What do you think you're doing?" Lucian blinked, looking utterly bewildered. This surprised Rosette. In the novel, Lucian was portrayed as a taciturn and indifferent person. As the new leader of the Royal Knights, he immediately became a sworn enemy of Abel, who led the opposing faction after the Royal Knights were split into two. But that was all in the future. Perhaps his current personality was different from how he would be when he grew up. Suddenly, Rosette noticed the color of Lucian's eyes. Wait a minute, was there a mention of golden eyes in the novel? She was confused. Meanwhile, Duke Ajur-Duller was still enthusiastically trying to engage Henriette in conversation. He even had the audacity to ask Henriette to invite him over to his house, his self-assured manner leaving Henriette speechless. It seemed this man was determined to latch onto him. Henriette turned, a reluctant expression on his face. "Fine, whatever." And so, the entire group boarded the carriage and returned to Winslet Castle. As Rosette stepped out of the carriage, she was still dazed. Not from motion sickness, but because Duke Ajur-Duller had been far too loud. He had practically deafened her throughout the entire journey. Although, in the novel, Duke Ajur-Duller was indeed described as the loudest of the 3 Grand Dukes of the Empire. He's supposed to be the most vivacious one, but this is a bit much, isn't it? Anyone who didn't know better would think his divine protection was the gift of gab. Mary tugged on the sleeve of a young palace maid, only then realizing that Lucian had, at some point, slipped quietly behind her. Her 3 brothers glared at him like tigers eyeing their prey. Looking at her brothers' unfriendly faces, Mary felt her head begin to ache. Remembering their earlier behavior and how none of them wanted her to have friends, she knew this wasn't good. If she let them stay together, they were bound to clash. She had to find a way to separate them. So, she offered to show Lucian around the courtyard. Camelon immediately volunteered to take him on the tour himself, but Mary refused him in the next breath. "You all look so scary. How are you supposed to entertain a guest? I'll take him to the courtyard. None of you are allowed to follow." Her words struck her brothers like a bolt from the blue. What would happen between Mary and Lucian in the courtyard? He was the son of one of the Empire's 3 Grand Dukes. He was also the righteous male protagonist of the novel. Knowing the entire plot, Mary's top priority was to stay on this protagonist's good side. So, she enthusiastically showed Lucian around her family's courtyard. Lucian was very obliging, even complimenting the flowers, saying they were the same beautiful color as Mary's hair. Then he began to chatter endlessly about his own family's garden. Mary couldn't help but sigh, thinking, like father, like son. Lucian went from talking about the garden to their travels, and then to their family's encounter. Watching Lucian's growing excitement, Mary decided it was time to make her move. "Your father and my father are friends," she declared. "So, how about we become good friends too?" Lucian's eyes lit up instantly. "Okay, from now on, we're friends." Suddenly, he asked, "By the way, Mary, what were you doing at that time? I mean, before I bumped into you in the tower?" Mary explained that she was praying for the sun god's protection and had offered a bouquet of flowers. Lucian's expression changed drastically. "Offering flowers is not allowed. We can't give anything to the guardian stars. Otherwise, they'll become like gods." Seeing Lucian's suddenly serious expression, Mary became nervous. A moment later, the boy's innocent smile returned. "But the guardian stars have never received gifts. They should be happy." Mary asked Lucian, "Do you know what a god is?" "Yes, I heard my father talk about it. There were gods 1,000 years ago. Then they disappeared. They fell from grace and even lost their names. So now there are no gods in the world, only curses. Curses, that's the stigma." As Lucian spoke about these things, his face was filled with conviction and seriousness. His entire aura changed. Mary couldn't help but stare, captivated. Suddenly, a hand grabbed her arm from behind. Startled by the pull, Mary turned her head. She saw Chi and looking at Lucian with hostility. Lucian, seeing the boy who had suddenly appeared, looked puzzled. He tilted his head and asked Mary, "Who is this?" Mary quickly explained that he was her friend. Chi then tightened his grip on Mary's arm. Would there be conflict between him and Lucian? As the saying goes, rivals in love meet with daggers drawn. What sparks would fly between the crown prince of the empire and the young duke? Chian remained silent, his arm firmly around Mary. Lucian looked indignant. "Mary is my friend. We're playing together. Don't bother us." Chian, shrouded in a dark aura, retorted, "Friend? Don't make me laugh." Mary was completely stunned. Were they vying to be her only friend? Before she could speak, she was pulled tightly by both of them, one on each side. The atmosphere was tense. Lucian looked anxious. "You're hurting Mary. Why don't you let go first, Your Highness?" Chian, his sore spot poked, replied with a steely expression, "You should be the one to let go. What are you trying to pull?" Lucian raised his voice. "That's going too far. I just want to play with Mary." Mary, pulled harder and harder by both of them, finally snapped. She wrenched her hands free. "Let go of me, both of you," she yelled, expressing her displeasure. "That hurts. It's really uncomfortable." Only then did the two would-be heroes realize their difference. Guilt-ridden, they apologized to Mary. The little girl crossed her arms, refusing to accept. "You don't need to apologize to me. You should apologize to each other and make up." Her words startled them both. In their eyes, peaceful coexistence wasn't an option. Mary's expression was firm. "You can't do that? Then I'll teach you. First, you shake hands, then you hug, and finally you say, 'I'm sorry, friend.' If you don't make up, I won't play with you." This was her trump card. Chian and Lucian exchanged glances for 2 seconds, their eyes filled with mutual defiance. But compelled by the situation, they completed the handshake, hug, and verbal apology in a mere 0.01 seconds. Finished, they both looked at Mary. "Is that okay now?" Mary widened her eyes. Although their actions were so fast, she hadn't even seen them clearly. The result was what mattered. But then she began to fret. What should she do with these two who were like fire and water? Suddenly, someone called her name from behind. Her brothers had arrived. Cameron anxiously asked what had happened. "The servants said you were arguing." How could Mary explain this to her brothers? What's the reaction of a brother with a sister complex when he hears his sister has been arguing with someone? Naturally, it's to rush to the scene and defend her. Abel politely bowed to Chian, "So, His Imperial Highness the Crown Prince is here as well. I apologize for not noticing you sooner. Was the commotion just now related to you as well?" Although he used honorifics, his tone was laced with a threat. Cameron put his arm around his sister, who bullied our Rosette. Mary never expected to face such a chaotic scene. Nervous sweat trickled down her face. Lucian, abandoning his usual arrogance, looked at her with wide, teary eyes and stammered, "I just wanted to play with you." In contrast, Chien pursed his lips, his face stubborn, remaining silent. "What's going on? What's all this commotion?" Duke Henriette had arrived on the scene unnoticed. And so, less than 15 minutes later, Mary sat obediently in the drawing room, enjoying pastries. She replayed the scene in her mind. Her father had first asked her what happened. Then, picking her up, he'd said, "Rosette, go and greet Duke Ajur-Duller. You too, take them for a walk around the estate." Just like that, he'd forcibly dissolved the awkward situation. Mary thought to herself, "I still need to talk to Chi and tell him not to argue with Lucien anymore." But then again, Lucien's tone and demeanor seemed to change constantly. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You're eating with gusto. Is it good?" Duke Ajur-Duller, who had been observing her for a while, couldn't help but speak. "Although I'd heard about it before, seeing Henriette turn into a doting father with my own eyes is still quite amazing." Henriette didn't retort, silently taking a sip of his coffee. Seeing this, Ajur-Duller laughed even harder. "See? You don't even deny it. Ha ha." He scrutinized Mary. "The more I look, the more the resemblance is striking." Henriette placed his coffee cup down with clink. "Stop your nonsense." Ajur-Duller continued. "How is this nonsense? I'm saying your daughter looks like your wife. How is that nonsense?" Henriette was about to stop him when Mary spoke. "Do I really look like mother?" She looked at her father expectantly. She only knew that in the novel, the Winslet ducal family consisted of the Duke and his 3 sons. Regarding the Duchess, she only remembered that she had tragically passed away in an accident 7 years prior. Within the ducal residence, the matter was shrouded in secrecy. Would Henriette tell his daughter about his wife? Mary, showered with love and affection, had never met her own mother, simply because she had passed away when Mary was very young. Everyone in the ducal residence kept it a secret. Faced with his daughter's curiosity about her mother, the Duke, who had always kept the secret, hesitated for the first time. Duke Ajur-Duller broke the silence. See? Now that your daughter is a little older, she's bound to be curious about her mother." His playful demeanor vanished as he began to reminisce. "Your mother was a very precious friend to us as well. We were close from our school days. She was the spirit of our academy." His words immediately piqued Mary's curiosity. Her mother, was she truly a beautiful woman, like a spirit? "Once, your mother caught a real spirit in the forest, which led to the Elven King storming our academy. That time, your mother caught an actual spirit in the forest, which caused the Elven King to march right into our academy. He even captured a remnant alive." This statement shattered the young Mary's idealized image of her mother. So, the reason her mother was called the Academy Sprite wasn't because she was ethereal like a sprite, but because she was as mischievous as one, always stirring up trouble. However, Duke Ajur-Duller shifted the conversation. She was also a recognized genius, you know? Even at a young age, she completed multiple theses. The professors were all astonished by her. Even Henriette used to help her with experiments. He didn't finish his sentence, cut off by Duke Henriette. He wasn't willing to tarnish the glorious image he held in his daughter's eyes. Well aware of his old friend's prideful nature, Ajur-Duller wisely changed the subject. "Your father doesn't want you to talk about it. Speaking of your father, he's coming out. You should go greet him." Mary asked her maid, Rosette, if she wanted to go find her brothers. Rosette shook her head. "Not this time. I want to go to the gallery." She arrived at the gallery again. Before her was a new family portrait. It had been painted recently, commissioned by her father, the Duke. A court painter had created the portrait. Mary sat primly in the center, surrounded by her father and 3 brothers. The scene was heartwarming, but she wasn't here to see the new portrait today. She walked to the old one, gazing at the image of her loving mother. She asked the question that had been weighing on her heart. How did my mother die? How could they answer this question? The young girl, showered with love and affection, had lost her mother at a young age. The servants in the ducal residence were tight-lipped about her mother. Facing her mother's portrait, Mary finally voiced her question. How did my mother die? Mary froze. But the stillness lasted only 2 seconds. She quickly regained her composure and began to deflect. Miss, your hair ornament is crooked. Let me fix it for you. By the way, are those new shoes? Are they comfortable? But Rosette didn't pick up on her attempt to change the subject. Actually, she continued, when I was at Duke Simon's estate, I heard a rumor. They said that my father, Duke Winslet, killed his wife. The maids immediately refuted her. No, miss, that's not true. How could there be such a rumor? The Duke loved his wife very much. Rosette looked at the frantically explaining maids, sadness flickering in her eyes. Though she didn't believe it herself, she still wanted confirmation. I've never had the chance to ask my family before. Seeing the sorrowful young girl, the maids desperately tried to explain. The Duke and Duchess had a wonderful relationship. Those people who know nothing just spout nonsense. And so, through their recounting, Mary finally learned about her parents' past. Unlike most noble couples, her parents hadn't entered into a political marriage. They had married for love. Despite their family's staunch opposition, they overcame numerous obstacles and finally became husband and wife. And the Duchess's death was due to an accident. Mary immediately pressed. What accident? Fina, summoning her courage, prepared to tell Mary the truth, but another maid stopped her. Fina's gaze was firm. Rather than letting Miss misunderstand, we should tell her the truth, even if it upsets the Duke. Mary's heart pounded in her chest. Her eyes were fixed on Fina, urging her to continue. 7 years ago, one day, there was a torrential downpour. Most of the servants were busy dealing with the problems caused by the heavy rain. And then a remnant appeared in the ducal residence. This familiar term made Mary's eyes widen. Witnesses said that a humanoid remnant invaded the residence. What exactly was a humanoid remnant? And what kind of disaster would its appearance bring to the ducal family? She was the unluckiest young lady in the world. Separated from her parents from a young age, she had endured countless cold stares and whispers. Rumors even circulated that her own father was her mother's murderer. And today, all her questions would be answered. 7 years ago, a torrential downpour disrupted life in the ducal residence. While most of the servants were busy dealing with the problems caused by the heavy rain, a humanoid remnant invaded the residence. Humanoid remnants were the most powerful and intelligent of all remnant forms. And the place where this remnant appeared happened to be the room where the Duchess and young Mary were staying. By the time the Duke arrived, it was already too late. Hearing this, the young Mary finally understood why she kept having the same dream. A dream with her mother, a terrifying rainy night, a dark, holy mark looming over her. Just as a clawed hand reached out from the mark, about to grasp her, a gleaming, spiritual sword pierced the hand. It wasn't a dream at all. It was a real memory. Mary then asked the maid, was father's confinement also a lie? Fina's face was grave. During the fight with Sheng Hung, the Duke was severely wounded. Coupled with the grief of losing his wife, he was in no state to care for you and your brothers. But the ducal house had many enemies. If his weakened state became known, it would have put the family in even greater danger. So he made an excuse, claiming he'd failed to defend his territory against Sheng Heng's invasion. He willingly accepted confinement. Before that, he sent all of you, his children, to places he believed were safe. Mary lowered her eyes, absorbing the truth. It was such a sudden, devastating tragedy. Yet, knowing the full story brought a strange sense of relief. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He hadn't ignored her. She was the only one who had escaped unharmed that day. The thought brought tears to Mary's eyes. Both her father and mother had endured such tragedy to protect her. Fina knelt down. My lady, we are so grateful that you returned safely and have grown up so bright and cheerful. I told you all this because I wanted you to know how deeply the Duke and your mother loved each other and how much they both cherished you. Looking at Fina's earnest face, Mary felt a bittersweet mix of sorrow and gratitude. It was another peaceful, starlit night. A soft knock echoed on Henriette's door. He opened it to find his beloved daughter standing there, clutching a small pillow. Can I sleep here tonight?